Rain falls heavily on the roof of an old barn against a gray, cloudy sky. Living dead wander around the flimsy wooden structure, looking for victims. A man is desperately knocking on the door from outside, trying to escape from the bloodthirsty creatures, screaming for the door to open for him. The screams of the man outside frighten the frightened people inside even more. 3 schoolboys hold the door of a barn, preventing a person from entering from outside. A blonde girl comes to the aid of a man knocking on the door. He is their classmate, and they cannot leave him. One of the guys holding the door objects that there are a lot of zombies behind the door. Most likely their classmate has already been bitten, and it is extremely dangerous to let him in. The blonde stands her ground, declaring that she takes responsibility for the consequences of helping her classmate. He's still talking, so he's not infected. They should let him in if they still have any conscience left. The boys agree that as soon as one of them opens the door and lets a classmate in, the other will immediately close it. As soon as the door opened, one of the enraged zombies immediately squeezed inside in search of food. The people standing inside watch in horror as the dead man attacks one of the guys holding the door. It turns out that the classmate knocking on the door is a zombie. He is infected and aggressive. He pounces on the protagonist and pins him to the floor with the weight of his body. The guy, trying to defend himself from the dead man, puts his hand forward and the zombie immediately bites him on the forearm. Brandon feels like he's experiencing a sense of déjà vu, a moment of realization. Everyone runs in panic, more monsters burst into the barn, and the main character is forced to saw off his infected hand. An already old Brandon lies in a high-tech capsule. The switch connected to his device is thrown. Brandon suddenly finds himself back in the moment when a classmate is knocking on the door, screaming. Trying to come to his senses, he freezes, still holding the door with the guys. Head girl Jessica again asks to let in the person standing behind the door in order to help him. After all, he is their classmate. It seems Brandon is amazed that he sees Jessica young again. She stands her ground, insistently ordering that her classmate be let into their barn. The guy remembered this day forever, and now he's finally here. The mechanic did it so that he could come back and change everything. He objects to Jessica, but she confidently asserts that if anything goes wrong, she will take care of everything. Brandon, pretending to obey her, agrees. The others watching their squabble remain silent. No one dares to take matters into their own hands. The indignant headman asks which of them is the man, trying to appeal to the guy's conscience, to which he only giggles. Brandon claims that people like her can only talk pompously, and always leave the dirty work to others, so that in the end they can take all the glory for themselves, bluntly calling her hypocritical. Brandon demonstratively invites Jessica to open the doors herself and help the poor man outside. Jessica was offended by the fact that the guy was shifting the work onto her. However, this is exactly what Brandon needed. Only he in this room knows what will happen in a few moments. Pushing aside the guys holding the door, she goes to the entrance and tells them to move aside and calls them cowards. She only has time to put her hand on the door handle, about to open it. Just then, an infected and already pretty battered classmate of the boys bursts in. Jessica falls painfully to the floor as the door swings open and tries to come to her senses. A zombie, once their classmate, a healthy person, looms over her in the doorway. The frightened children in the room realize that he is infected and tremble with fear. In an attempt to escape from the monster, the headman clings to one of the boys. They are at a dead end and have nowhere to run. In a panic, she pushes one of the guys right towards the zombie in order to save herself. Brandon then gave her a vigorous kick in the side, pushing her straight towards the dead man. He smirks contentedly as he watches the blonde being captured by the hungry cannibal. Having grabbed the victim, the zombie opens its mouth wide, preparing to bite off a piece of its flesh. But unexpectedly, Brandon saves her by smashing the dead man's head with a heavy wrench he had prepared in advance. Blood from the blow gushes onto a pale and frightened Jessica, while Brandon's face expresses calm. Still clutched by the monster, the girl falls to the ground with his lifeless body. Pressed against the corpse, she desperately asks the standing guy for help, hoping that he will free her. Jessica has bullied him all his life, and now he thinks it's her turn to be on the other side. Picking up the door from the floor, he puts it back in place, ignoring the questions and screams of the lying blonde. Brandon orders the others to stop standing and help him barricade himself. With their combined efforts, they place a lot of weight at the door so that no one else can enter. Jessica is knocking vigorously outside and hysterically ordering to be let in. Inside, ignoring her cries, the guys concentrated on holding the barricade. The head girl keeps trying to convince them to let her in, since she is the head girl, and they can't do that to her. People are scared and frozen in fear, and those holding the door are doing it with the last of their strength. At dawn, the girl stops screaming and banging on the door and disappears somewhere. Brandon's classmates begin to whisper and discuss his actions behind his back. Turning sharply towards them, the main character frightens the boys, who are already on the verge of a nervous breakdown. When he asks them if they are afraid of him, they answer negatively, albeit unconvincingly. One of the guys holding the door thanks him, because if it weren't for Brandon, he would have died because of Jessica. The others agree that the girl deserved such a fate, because everyone would have died because of her. Fortunately, Brandon reacted quickly. Otherwise, they would have been in big trouble. He smiles at the boys and asks them to open the door so he can go outside and look around. They ask him again in fear, not quite understanding if this is what he means. He explains that it was really mean of him to throw the girl out, and he would like to go out and see if she is alive. But the guys are against it. They are afraid of what lurks on the streets, the walking dead. Faced with a refusal, he angrily and loudly shouts at them to open the door. It works, and with the load out of the way, the door is moved aside, allowing the guy to pass through. Brandon calmly walks out into the street with the notorious red wrench on his shoulder. Taking a couple of steps away from the barn, he notices that the class president and their zombie classmate are nowhere to be found. The door behind him slams shut with a loud bang, cutting off the path to the shelter. He hears them barricading themselves inside. Thinking he's a bastard and too dangerous, who knows who he'll kick out next. In response to this, Brandon only smirks and moves on with the wrench. Seeing this through the window, the guys are excited by his action. One of the guys notices that a walking dead man in a red dress is walking towards the guy. The walking dead this time is a woman in a red dress, but it doesn't matter. Brandon rushes at her. The guys are completely shocked to see what this psychopath Brandon is doing. A big swing, body forward, and the wrench pierces the zombie's soft head like Brandon is butchering a chicken carcass. Yes, that's it. Brandon hit the zombie right in the head with all his might again. His classmates feel like they're watching either a horror movie or the story of an American Psycho. From the pieces of his crushed head, he takes out a green ball, from which a faint light emanates. It is energetic black gold, a source of doomsday and an essential item for mechanics. A real reward for a zombie bounty hunter. At this moment, a dead old man in a white t-shirt and trousers approaches him from the side. For reasons of cruelty, we won't show you what happened to the poor zombie grandpa, but believe me, Brandon gave him a good workout. Watching this, his classmates note that he has changed a lot. Until recently, he was a timid and inconspicuous guy. Some girls cry from fright, and guys never cease to be surprised by the sudden changes in Brandon's behavior. One of them offers to let him back in so that he can help them fight the zombies. But the second guy immediately argues with him, because Brandon is crazy and unpredictable. A senseless argument between a bunch of weaklings begins. At this time, the window is broken with a wrench. It was Brandon. He threateningly asks if they are going to sit here, suggesting that they go kill the dead, because it is so much fun. It seems that this idea made the guys wet themselves on the spot, both of them, at once. They managed to shout to him that there is a dead man walking behind them. It is a man in a suit, already pretty shabby perhaps. Dear YouTube viewer, this is your alcoholic neighbor, whom you disliked so much in your childhood. Brandon manages to push him away and smash his head with a key with a wide swing. The body falls to the ground, spraying blood everywhere and staining the boy himself. Initially, the protagonist wanted to go with his classmates. But considering that he could mutate, he decides to part with them here, admitting that he does not intend to harm them. In parting, he expressed hope that this time they would all be able to survive. They didn't expect the guy to leave like that. So there was silence in the room for a couple of minutes. Judgment Day is the beginning of the end of humanity. A zombie virus has swept the world, infecting 50% of the population and causing complete economic and political collapse. The number of zombies grew every day, and people living in fear and despair fought each other for living space and food, plunging into endless anarchy. A professor who was considered an expert on zombies called this time the Dark Ages. Because of the Elder's actions, zombies bit Brandon on the arm, and then, in order to survive, it had to be amputated. After this, the suffering did not end, and he had to wander for 50 years. He was hungry, suffered, froze, and went crazy, until he met a mechanic who, with his last strength before dying, sent him back in time to the moment when it all was just beginning. The men watching the boy at this time are surprised by the schoolboy's carefree gait, assuming that he has gone mad with hunger and decided that he has nothing to lose. One of them has the idea to invite him inside, but the other one is against it, because the guy might already be infected. Brandon approaches a playground where the dead are swarming, loitering around colorful buildings. The creatures that notice his presence run after him in an attempt to eat him. One of the observers notices this. The second only grumbles that this is not the best time to look for food. The main character deftly parries the zombie attack by waving a key. Astonished male observers note the brutality of Brandon's fight. Another spectator is watching him, the woman irritably swearing to kill him sooner or later. The zombies continue to approach the guy. There are more and more of them. Brandon starts running away from them, cursing that such a chase ensued because of a small noise. People watching him through the window realize that he is running towards them. He actively knocks on the roller shutters, asking to be let inside. Noticing a surveillance camera, he looks straight into the lens and reports that he is wounded and being chased by monsters. The old man believes that after he stirred up the crowd, even the biggest idiot won't open the door for him. Around the corner, the figure of a dead man running after his victim appears. The guy in the suit fought off the dead man with a practiced blow. With jagged blows, he tries to fight off the rest of the motley crowd of creatures, among them women and men, all looking for food. Brandon manages to slip through a small gap in the roller shutters from below. The blinds close behind him, and the dead pound on the metal, their prey having escaped before their very eyes. The main character got up from the floor and realized that he was in a supermarket building, with goods, mostly food, on the shelves. Hidden behind the cash register, a girl with bows in her hair quietly watches him. The guys at the window discuss Brandon and his fierce fight for survival with the creatures. One of them turns to Scullapendra, telling him how the guy dealt with 6 zombies single-handedly and was able to get into the store across the street. An intrigued man sits on a kind of throne and makes a suggestion that apparently zombies are not so strong. If the schoolboy could do it, then they can too, thinks the leader of the gang of men. Brandon notices movement at the cash register at the store and orders her to get out. He also asks to quickly give him the remote control for the roller door, demandingly putting his palm forward. Without waiting for an answer, he sighs heavily, tired and dirty, covered in the blood of monsters. He puts on a show pretending to be tormented by an open wound and asking for help. The girl runs out to him, her legs covered with bandages, and she herself is dressed only in a large shirt. Brandon grabs her right hand tightly with his dirty palm. He demands that the remote be given to him in exchange for freedom from his tight grip. The frightened girl tries to pretend that she doesn't understand what kind of remote control they're talking about. Noticing the aforementioned remote control in her other hand, he tries to take it away from her. The guy angrily kicks one of the food racks with a dirty sneaker. He calls the girl a fool and scolds her for believing him in his lies about the wound. Brandon lies on a dirty bed. A girl in a shirt fusses over him. When the bandage is changed, he clenches his jaw in pain, tensing his whole body. After this torment, the guy awkwardly thanks her for saving his life. She says that it is very dangerous outside and that is why her father told her to stay in the store. The girl tells the guy to rest on the bed while she brings food. Lying alone, he thinks about how he came so far, and only she dared to open the doors and let him in. There's a scream from below. A girl asks what they're doing here, and I start screaming, asking them not to pass by and to leave a comment under this video. Good luck to you, my beloved YouTube viewer. The man thanks the girl with a crooked smile for opening the door for them. The girl, frozen in horror, thought that they were simply dying of hunger. They meanly deceived her in order to get to the products from her store. The girl claims that her father will return soon, but the man says that they have already met him and decided to use her as bait to distract the zombies. Licking his lips disgustingly, he says that there are only them here and no one will bother them. While she is being brutally tortured, Brandon just sits scared in the corner, trying not to make any sounds so as not to get caught. She was tortured and killed, all because of excessive kindness, and then he could only hide in that corner in fear. But now he is determined to repay his debt and be sure to save her. And first he wants her to realize that there is darkness under the sun, even if it makes her think he is a bad person. The girl gently knocks on the bathroom door where Brandon is. He angrily responds with a shout, demanding that they not bother him while he is in the shower. The girl is frightened by his sharp and rude answer and apologizes, explaining that she brought him clean clothes. The guy orders her to leave her clothes at the door and get out immediately. A dejected girl with neatly folded things in her arms stands uncertainly. The guy grumbles, dissatisfied with the girl's obedience because it will be difficult for her to survive in their post-apocalyptic world. But then he switches his attention to the shower. He hasn't been able to wash himself for a long time and is thoroughly enjoying the warm water. As the number of zombies increases, more and more springs will become polluted. The water is expected to be turned off here in a few days, the guy recalls as he turns off the water. Luckily, they're in the store, so the supplies here will last quite a while. The next thing he plans to do is search for equipment and weapons. Looking at himself in the mirror, he notes that it is nice to see himself young again. Young and soft skin, no back pain, no leg pain. It's good to be young, he concludes. The only problem is with the press. I'll need to work on the muscles in this area. The main character, wearing only a towel, opens the bathroom door. A couple of minutes later, a scream is heard from him. He is unhappy that the girl gave him a suit. because it is inconvenient to fight zombies in it. The gang leader gathers all his subordinates at headquarters. He says that this karaoke bar has alcohol and food, but you can't stay in this hole for long. You need to create another survival base to cope with future difficulties. His first goal is to go out and kill all the zombies in the area, and then capture the store and provide himself with food. Besides, there's a nice girl living in that store. The horny bandit notes she's the only one left, except for that schoolboy who recently ran there. He gives the green light to his servants, ordering them to kill all the zombies and take over the store. The girl sitting at the checkout counter is eating a cookie and waiting for Brandon after his shower. The protagonist is angry that she didn't answer his question and tells her to get out of there. The guy asks if she lives here alone and where her family is now. She explains that her father went out to replenish supplies and promised to return, still hiding behind the counter. He scolds her for the frivolity with which she let him in here, because he could do something bad. Vanessa tries to justify herself by saying that he screamed that he was wounded, and she saw him covered in blood. He continues to yell at her, asking if she saw zombies chasing him, and if she even thought about what was happening. He clutches his head and complains that such a naive coward will eventually become only a burden to him, and it's better to get rid of her before it's too late. However, he will be bored alone, and there will be no one to even take care of him if something happens. Brandon declares that from now on she will be obliged to do everything he says. If she disobeys, he will kill her. One of the zombies attacks a guy from the gang from behind, biting his ear to the flesh. Other zombies fall upon him, eating him alive, while the others watch. They didn't expect the zombies to go crazy, since the schoolboy had somehow defeated them. The leader demands that they continue to fight the creatures. One of the frightened guys, a red-haired skinny man, screams and tries to run away in panic. But the main bandit manages to grab the fleeing man by the hair and bring him back. He throws him right into the crowd of the dead to be torn apart, demonstrating to the others what will happen if they run away. In his death throes, the red-haired man screams and asks how he could do such a thing. The remaining gang members are tensely fighting off the zombies with whatever means they have at hand, but their numbers keep growing. The leader gives the order to retreat due to the huge number of creatures. They retreat, but the zombies are chasing them. A girl comes into Brandon's room with boiled noodles on a tray for him. Brandon sat and twirled the green ball he had obtained earlier in his hand, and rudely told the girl to get lost. He ordered her not to disturb him until he called her himself. She obediently agreed and closed the door behind her. Oh my god, can he smell that wonderful warm noodle smell again? The girl wishes you bon appetit and closes the door. After the door slammed, Brandon wasted no time in diving into the hot food. In this safe moment, food was his comfort, and he couldn't help but smile as he remembered its nostalgic taste. And also saying that in the future these very noodles will become a universal delicacy. The joyful moment did not last long, and the guy suddenly heard a noise from the street. Before I could think about it, there was a sharp sound of breaking glass, and a man's hard human hand appeared in the shards. This man turned out to be an enemy from the protagonist's past. A red-haired man of strong build, with numerous scars on his rough skin, a cruel, pompous look with a desire for poisonous power. The guy met him with a sharp and dry look, because he had foreseen his appearance in advance and had been ready for revenge for a long time. Leaning with one hand on the windowsill and hanging with his whole body above the ground, the man shouted at the guy to help him immediately, and if he didn't help, he would kill him on the spot. Quickly grabbing a thermos of hot water, Brandon headed towards the enemy. At that very second, boiling water poured onto the man's rough palm, leaving behind a strong burn and steam. He screamed at the top of his lungs and loosened his grip, almost falling back, while the boiling water continued to pour out of the vessel, leaving him no chance of salvation. During the entire performance, the guy grinned and kept saying to the man that if he wanted to kill him, he would do it first. Suddenly, a girl grabbed Brandon's hand and pulled it back, which he didn't expect at all. She stuttered and weakly asked him to stop, still trying to pull him away from the broken window and the man. With glassy eyes, she begged the guy to let him in quickly, and not to harm him under any circumstances. The protagonist immediately turned his gaze on her and ordered her to leave the room, reminding her of his words not to enter until called, and besides, she doesn't even know the person she's so fiercely protecting. With the same harmless face, the girl stubbornly continued to babble on about how her father told her that it was wrong to harm people. There was silence in the room as the act continued, with both men staring at her like she was a fool, which is exactly what she looked like at the time. The guy lost his temper and yelled at her, asking if she was really not afraid at all and didn't foresee that this man could simply finish her off. He didn't waste any time, having long ago changed his position and leaned on his other working hand, and began to climb into the room, pretending to be a good guy, and saying that he certainly didn't intend to kill her or cause harm. That he was just hungry, and in desperation decided to look for food, having found himself surrounded by zombies, and the only way out was to climb here. He also doesn't want to jump back into the crowd, and if the girl were so kind, she would definitely let him sit out for a bit, and he would immediately leave when the zombies disperse. Looking angrily at her, Brandon thought that he should have been pushed back into the crowd as quickly as possible. Then his chances of survival would have been immediately reduced, but he couldn't kill him in front of the girl. By that time, the man's foot had already crossed the threshold of the windowsill, and the guy immediately fixed his gaze on the stationary knife lying on the nightstand. The bastard found himself fully inside the room, and with a disgusting grin declared that this place now belonged to him, and anyone who dared to disobey him would die. The fool, naive in her kindness, was immediately horrified by his words and froze in fear. Meanwhile, the man's supporters who remained in their lair held the door with their backs as the zombies battered at it. The eldest of them indignantly told the boy that now, because of the idiotic idea of their leader, they were doomed to death. But they could have held out here for a few more months. Their captives hid at the far end of the room, covering their heads with their hands, and the man kept shouting for their leader, nicknamed Skalapendra, to die where he was hiding. The dead had almost broken down the doors and were advancing ever more, and the men began to lose their strength and patience. The bald man shouted at the women and ordered them to get up and help them hold the entrance. The next second, the entire group of 4 people were holding the doors, and the man was perversely thinking only about how he hadn't had time to have fun with the ladies in the absence of their boss, and all that was left was to run to the balcony and jump while everyone was blocking the door. Meanwhile, the red-haired man stood near the broken window and smirked at the helplessness of the teenagers. Laughing at the girl, he said how sweet and naive she was, that she still let him in and believed in his kind fairy tales. Now, instead of killing her, he will teach her everything and make her his slave. Immediately turning his hateful gaze to the guy, he recalled how he had scalded him with boiling water, and declared that feeding him to the zombies would be too easy, and that instead, he would come up with another, more sophisticated method of killing him. First, he will crush his bones, then chop up his limbs, and when they are dry, he will stuff them into flower vases. Meeting his fantasies with an indifferent look, Brandon readily held the knife in his hand and remained silent, and the girl kept trying to stop the villain with empty persuasion, exclaiming that their family owned this store, and that down below there's plenty of food for everyone. Hot sticks, chocolate bars, instant noodles, and teddy bear cookies. Everyone was stunned by her pitiful appearance and stupidity, but she kept smiling from ear to ear, suggesting that they all eat together, and, having eaten their fill, forget about all their problems. This performance made the man lose his composure, and he attacked the girl with rage. In an instant, the protagonist covered the little girl, and with one wave of his hand neutralized the attempted attack, cutting off his fingers with the cold blade of a knife. He burst into tears, and the guy with the cold gaze of a killer prepared for the next attack, aiming at the man's throat. Immediately noticing his action, the red-haired man intercepted the guy's hand, and the sharpened end of the metal shone with its shine, stopping right at the neck. He immediately knocked the schoolboy face down on the floor, and with a hard kick threw him to the end of the room, and the girl with one blow of his hand to the side. Panting in pain, holding his hand with severed fingers, the man slowly made his way towards the boy. Nothing had ever taken so much from him in his entire life as this boy. Lying on the floor, Brandon was losing strength. It felt like the man had broken his ribs with that blow. At that very second, the red-haired man pressed the guy's leg with his heavy boot, causing him to let out a cry of pain, and declared that before he killed him, he wanted to know how the guy could deal with zombies so easily. The guy just grinned and muttered that in that case it would be worth treating him with more respect, and then perhaps he would reveal his secret. Because of that very irritating answer, he became even more angry. He began to aggressively kick the guy with a force capable of killing a person. Brandon could only cover himself with one hand, angry that his attempt to teach the girl a lesson had turned into this. He couldn't stand it, and started babbling to get the man to stop, that he would tell him everything. He pulled him towards him by the collar, and demanded that he give out the information as quickly as possible. But the guy just spat blood in his face, at which point the man lost all patience and went berserk, throwing him with all his strength into the wall. He kicked him with his foot, and with eyes full of hatred, assured the guy that all this was not a game. Otherwise, he will play with him only until his death. Starting with a kick, he continued to beat the guy with furious kicks to the face and jaw. The next moment, a glimmer of a blade appeared, the handle of which was held by both palms of the woman's hands. Suddenly, Vanessa grabbed the knife and plunged it into the bastard's forearm. He got distracted and knocked the girl down with one blow of his hand with his fingers cut off. Having pulled the knife out of the deep wound, the man turned completely towards her. The red-haired man's angry roar filled the room, and he swung the blade at the girl with the intention of finishing her off. But he didn't have time. At that very second, his head was pierced by an iron pipe. Soon, the man was lying motionless on the floor, face down, with a pool of scarlet blood flowing from his head, while Brandon stood behind him, his hand leaning weakly on the end of the pipe. The girl looked at the pool of blood in fear, unable to believe the big man was dead. Her palms and the sleeves of her white shirt were covered in blood, and with tears in her eyes, the girl realized that she had killed a person for the first time. The main character's male hand fell on her shoulder in a calming gesture. The schoolboy quietly assured the little girl that everything was fine. She had done what she had to do with that bastard. Vanessa looked at the floor with eyes full of despair, and explained that she only wanted to help him. The girl did not understand such a reciprocal attitude towards herself at all. Meanwhile, Brandon felt the man's pulse and discovered that he was still alive. He quickly ordered the girl to calm down and go wash up. With hope in her eyes, the little girl sadly asked the boy again, and she exclaimed that in that case he needed immediate help. At that very moment, Vanessa was already flying straight to the door. All that could be heard were the guy's angry insults and parting words addressed to her. After Brandon locked the door and headed towards the big guy's body, how this girl irritates him. Thinking that this freak had defiled his room, the guy grabbed him by the leg and dragged him to the window with the intention of getting rid of him once and for all. After he reached the broken window, he began to hang the body over the windowsill. The man flew down with a kick under the indifferent gaze of the main character. The crowd of zombies immediately smelled the human flesh lying motionless on the wet asphalt. At that very moment, the man was surrounded by dead people on all sides. All he could do was live out the last seconds of his life in agony. As a parting word, Brandon shouted at him that if he had a better knife, he would have cut off all his limbs before throwing him off. Suddenly, the boy glanced to the side and saw the youngest member of their team frantically climbing down the wall of the building opposite. The schoolboy called out to him and asked if there were any survivors where he had come from. The guy answered negatively and said that while they were trying to barricade themselves, someone loosened their grip, as a result of which the zombies were able to break through and kill everyone. Only he remained alive. Afterwards, he hopefully asked Brandon if he could help him, and assured him that in that case, he would go over to their side. With a tired gesture, the protagonist refused the guy and advised him to run away if he did not want to end up in the place of their leader. Quickly looking down, the guy understood the situation and jumped to the side. He managed to find support in the balcony railing and not fall down, after which he quickly ran in the opposite direction. The main character just looked down carelessly at him from the window from which he had recently thrown out the corpse. He was upset that the zombies hadn't eaten them all, and then shouted at the guy to stay out of his sight and not cause problems. Meanwhile, it had gotten dark outside, and the sound of a door opening was heard, and Vanessa was still sitting at the threshold, her legs pressed tightly to her body. Brandon just reproached the girl. He asked her to take a shower. Why was she still sitting here? But she only silently looked through the crack at the traces of blood on the wall and windowsill, to which the guy asked not to look at him. The man was already downstairs. Again, with hope in her eyes, the girl looked at him and asked if the man had escaped. Laughing at her naivety, Brandon explained to the girl how he could resist a crowd of zombies if he was not human. Seeing the blood, the girl is upset. She does not understand why our hero killed him. Brandon got angry. He slammed the wall above the girl and started shouting that she didn't understand anything, and if she treated him kindly, she might get a knife in the back. He says that in order to survive, they must kill people like him, that the real end of the world has begun. The girl is scared, and from her facial expression you can tell that she didn't know about the beginning of the apocalypse. Brandon realizes that there is no point in talking to her, and after calling her stupid, he goes to take a shower again. The girl, trying to say something, runs to him, but right near the stairs, she loses consciousness and falls to the ground. The protagonist catches her and does not understand at all what caused her current state. He picks up the girl and carries her to a more suitable place so that she can lie down. The guy examines her body and finds no bruises, so the assumption that she was injured is ruled out. Touching the girl's forehead, Brandon realizes that she has a fever and begins searching for medicine in the cabinets in the room. He knew something was wrong with her. He tries to remember what happened before, but it doesn't work because it was a very long time ago. Among the books and other things on the shelf, with some effort, he finally finds the first aid kit. Among the pills and other things, he notices a strange pink notebook, which immediately attracts his attention. When he opened it, the first thing he read was that it contained a list of donations. The girl writes there that she received a course of chemotherapy only thanks to people who decided to help her from the bottom of their hearts, and therefore, In the future, she also wants to be kind. The guy, analyzing the contents, finally realized that it was a medical record. Looking at the unconscious girl, he began to understand what was happening to her. After reading her card, Brandon learned that the girl was 14 years old and had leukemia. Rolling up his sleeve, he saw that there were many bandages on her arms, hiding the wounds. It was for this very reason that she wanted to save that fucking bastard no matter what. But the world has changed, and at this time there will be no place for kindness from a pure heart. He felt something strange in his pocket, and then he remembered that he had little green zombie balls. Brandon doesn't know if it can help her, but he apparently decided to try it just in case. It's slowly starting to get light on the streets filled with crowds of zombies. Early in the morning, Brandon woke up, yawning, began to pull himself up and slowly come to his senses. He noticed that behind his back, with the door slightly open, the same girl was peeping at him. Our hero asked how she was feeling, but did not receive a clear answer. Deciding that everything was fine, he asked her to prepare breakfast, namely instant noodles. When the girl was about to leave to carry out the assignment, he called out to her again. Brandon told her to pack all her things because he was going to look for her father. She froze in one place, confused about how to understand that they would look for her dad. The boy explains that they will go to the store where the father went for supplies, so that they can quickly find him and leave the girl with him. The girl says her dad told her to stay in the house until he returned, lock the door and not go out. The guy frowned and sternly asked how many days he hadn't returned home. "About 3 days," she replied, looking down and apparently beginning to understand that the situation was going badly. Brandon, continuing to press the girl, asks how long it usually takes him to replenish his supplies. Nervously, she replies that it usually only takes about half a day. Brandon suggests considering what could have happened to him if he hasn't returned for more than this amount of time. The girl is scared and starts screaming that nothing could have happened to him, that he called and said he would be back soon. The protagonist continues to stand his ground and repeat the same thing over and over again to get his point across. There are two options. Either the father has already been captured by zombies, or he has fallen into a trap and is waiting to be rescued. And who else can save him if they don't go looking for him themselves? The girl resists. She is too obedient to disobey her father. This is starting to get on her nerves. He's probably in trouble right now, and she doesn't want to go and save him. Brandon starts screaming because she wanted to save that thug, but she doesn't want to do the same to her father. The guy doesn't ask her opinion. He could kill her and leave, but he wants to help because she saved his life. In a rage, he yells that the girl better shut up and quickly go get ready, as he ordered. In fear, she runs away from him and, not noticing anything, falls down the stairs again. A camouflaged car rushes at full speed into a crowd of standing zombies. The zombies wanted to pounce, but she, without stopping, knocks down and runs over everyone in her path. At the store, Brandon collects supplies such as pasta and various canned goods into a bag. He asks the girl, peeking out from behind the shelf, what she is hiding there for, and whether she is ready to go further. She chose a beautiful blue dress and a pink bunny bag, to which she received a remark that she dressed as if she were going to a picnic. Brandon, telling her to ignore his comment, asks about the noodles he asked her for and receives a positive answer. Sitting in complete silence, the only sound you can hear is the main character chomping as he eats his noodles. He comes up with a plan of action, deciding whether it is possible to leave the girl alone and return for her later. At this time, the baby is sad, looking down, and eating the treat without thinking about anything. Seeing the sharp sticks in the girl's hands, Brandon reaches out to ask for one for himself. At that moment, a car crashes into the wall at high speed, knocking over the rack with all its contents. The guy covers the girl with himself, protecting her from falling things and thinking that it is caused by an earthquake. Afterwards, they saw that a huge machine had run over all the zombies outside. A plump man in military uniform comes out of it, happily talking about what a good shop he found. A soldier crushes a zombie's head, saying that they are good when they are dead despite the fact that they are the walking dead. Taking a huge bag, he is going to take for himself everything that is in this store. Patrick grabs everything from the floor, especially chips and bear cakes, because he loves them. Most likely, the rest of the supermarkets in the city have already been looted, so after this he will have to go to more remote places. They put a knife to his throat from behind and ordered him to leave everything he took in place. Brandon threatens him that a pig like him clearly doesn't want to be fed to zombies. Turning sharply, he throws packs of cookies in the protagonist's face to distract his attention. Having grabbed all the loot, he goes on the run and tries to quickly get into the car and drive away. But the guy, getting ready to kill him, climbs into the car through the window and threatens him with a knife. The huge man is frightened by such a gesture and begins to beg Brandon for mercy. The girl didn't like this, and she shouts at our hero to stop killing people. After she had all the attention, she toned down her indignation a little and continued more calmly. Her store was damaged because of him, and if Brandon killed him, there would be no one to pay for the damage. The payment for the store will be his car, and they also need a driver, and this man looks like a good candidate. Brandon tells the little girl to go get the luggage and load it into the man's car. Patrick justifies that he was just hungry and would not have rushed into the store if he knew there was someone there. Holding a heavy bag in her hands, she notices something in the distance from them. There was a group of zombies again, and they were heading towards them quickly. The fat man just crushed all the weaklings in the area, and this is something like a new batch. Brandon ordered to get into the car quickly, and Vanessa, hurrying, fell into the back seat. Patrick, behind the wheel, warns everyone to fasten their seatbelts and gets ready to start driving. He puts the car into reverse, and, as he backs up, crushes all the zombies that were about to eat them. The fat man swerves so abruptly that Brandon and Vanessa, who hadn't had time to buckle up, are thrown all over the car. But the driver does not slow down, but on the contrary, presses full throttle and continues on his way. He gets pleasure from the way he takes a turn, knocking down all the weaklings in his path. Brandon is outraged by this behavior, as if he wants to kill them, and threatens to stab him for such a trip. The driver immediately becomes confused and makes the excuse that he must get rid of all the zombies before leaving. The main character asks the girl where her father might be now so he can tell the man where to go. She answers that the last time they spoke on the phone, he was at the Eastern Market. Patrick says that things are bad, because there were always a lot of people there, which means it's overflowing with zombies. Brandon, threatening with a knife, asks for less whining, because if he was told to go there, let him do it. A man asks permission to turn on music because he's bored on the road, but is told that making noise is not allowed. In this case, he wants to sing himself, because he does it well, but an irritated Brandon asks him to shut up. There's a zombie on the road, stuck in a tree branch, and our hero's car is driving towards him. A car hits a dead guy, and his remains are scattered in small pieces all over the highway. The man sings and laughs as he knocks down another zombie girl, clearly enjoying the process. The main character clicks his tongue, asking him to calm down and let him sleep so that they won't be killed later. It's boring on the road, and a man has to entertain himself. The car is durable, and such impacts won't harm it. Brandon is freaking out because doesn't Patrick understand that he's just asking him to stop? The man stops the car and receives a disapproving response that he was asked to stop singing. Patrick starts screaming hysterically throughout the car because it has run out of fuel. The protagonist is completely angry because they drove halfway, and he didn't even think about refueling. The situation is worsened by the fact that there are no gas stations nearby. While the man is eating his fill to die full, Brandon tells him to get out of the car and distract all the zombies. Vanessa let out a terrified howl as a zombie's face crashed into the window of her seat, wanting to eat her. The zombies started to surround their cars. At this rate, they could die on the spot. Brandon notices that there is a huge machete-type knife in a sheath in the seat pocket. Without thinking, the guy opens the car door with his foot and pushes the zombie standing next to him. A zombie pounces on him, and Brandon, with a flourish and clanking sound, pulls the weapon out of its case. Little Vanessa watches as Brandon slices open a zombie's head, blood splashing onto the window. He notices a plump woman, turned into a zombie, sneaking up behind him. Brandon screams that a regular knife won't kill such a fat zombie and plunges his own into his head. But from the other side, 2 more weaklings are running towards him, and he immediately pays attention to them. He kicks away the rotten body and cuts its head off with one sharp movement. Immediately after this, he swings and pierces the head of the zombie under his feet. Patrick, who was watching this, was inspired. For him, it was bold and very cool. Brandon asks the fat man to get out quickly, but receives tearful cries that he is afraid to leave. He yells at him to calm down, because if Patrick sits in the car, he will die sooner or later anyway. While they were driving, there were a lot of cars parked on the side of the road, and if they were lucky, they would find fuel in them. Brandon says he'll clear the road while Patrick siphons gas. The guy hopes that he knows how to drain gas, because he talked about cars the whole way and gets a positive answer. The protagonist tells little Vanessa that she will stay in the car, and she agrees. Patrick says he's not mentally prepared, but the guy snaps back that he just needs to prepare a few bottles. Even if there is still soda in the bottles, the fat man will just have to pour it out. The guy had already resolutely begun to clear the way, killing the approaching zombies. Patrick regrets not having scared them back in the store. But who knew it would turn out like this? The man calls out to the guy, to which Brandon furiously asks why he is standing still. Saying that he suddenly remembered that the car has a spare gas tank, Brandon thinks that Patrick should make the most of his unusual situation. The hero made an angry face, realizing that all his work had been in vain. Patrick apologizes and says that he shouldn't have been scared like that, because he forgot about it because of the shock. He opens the trunk and asks you to wait, saying that he will do everything now. But Brandon doesn't let him start, suggesting they do something else and get gas later. The guy showing his fist says that he wants Patrick to collect something for him and shows a green ball. These black beads are hidden in zombie brains, and Brandon needs a man to help him collect them all. Patrick makes a sound of confusion, to which the guy demonstrates how to do it correctly. He shows the ball to Patrick, making sure he understands exactly how it's done. Patrick tries to shirk the issue, saying it's disgusting and that he'd rather sit in the car. But Brandon, using convincing threats, cleverly forces the man to help him. The guy kills and Patrick gets the goods. But if Brandon notices that he is slacking off, the next one he will kill will be Patrick himself. Patrick looks hesitantly at the stricken zombie. Realizing he must take action, he feels sick because zombies are disgusting enough as it is, and now he has to climb into their brains. Patrick, languishing, screams that even though he's fat, the zombies will still bite him, so let Brandon protect him. Snapping and continuing to defend himself, the guy responds that he talks too much. Patrick, afraid that the zombies will move, carefully approaches and is impressed that the guy made a precise cut. While cracking open a zombie's head with a shovel, the fat man is surprised that their skulls are so fragile. It's surprising, because when he opens his head, he actually finds a black bead there. He looks at the green glow in them and compares them to a pearl in a shell. He excitedly asks Brandon if this thing is worth a lot of money, but is ordered to shut up and get to work. Patrick decides that this is what turns people into zombies and is going to keep one for himself. Having killed everyone, Brandon decides to take a rest, since the rest are too far away, and there's no point in attracting their attention. He says that he has almost gotten used to his previous body, but it is not enough. It is too slow. Looking at Patrick's accumulation, he asks how many beads he has already collected. Joyfully, he holds the impressionable handful in his hands, saying what a good harvest it is. The fat man shows the result of this difficult task, and Brandon tells him to wash them and put them somewhere. Everything is going well, because all that remains is to fill the tank, and they will continue on their way. During this time, Vanessa's fever returned and she passed out in the car seat. Brandon barely opened the door and saw her condition, and, frightened, rushed to see what had happened. Touching her forehead, he realized that the situation was worse than last time, and something had to be done. Deciding that Vanessa must have taken her medications with her, he began rummaging through her purse. Having found what she needed, Brandon gave her a pill and, holding the bottle in his hands, helped her wash it down with water. Patrick noticed something was wrong and decided that she had heat stroke, but the guy snapped and told her to mind her own business. He finished filling the car with gas and got behind the wheel, asking how the girl was feeling, because it was very hot today, and she had been sitting in the car for a long time. But in response to the question, his own mask began to rapidly approach his face. Brandon says that this is all happening because Patrick lied about having fuel and delayed everyone. And if something happens to Vanessa, Brandon will cut him into small pieces. Patrick is scared and begs for mercy, saying that he will drive well and will not do it again. The protagonist remains in the back seat next to the baby, and they set off on their journey again. Patrick, saying that the boy was good with a machete, finally got around to asking his name. But Brandon replies that if he wants to meet someone, he first needs to introduce himself. Enough, he replies that his name is Patrick Mannerson, and he is the manager of the local auto repair shop. This car was left at the auto repair shop by his friend, but he never returned, so now it belongs to him. Just as Brandon was about to introduce himself, the car suddenly brakes sharply, interrupting him. The guy is thrown forward across the cabin by inertia and only manages to lean on the machete in his hands. Brandon gets angry and yells that he decided to brake sharply again. Does he want to die or something? But such a maneuver was carried out because of the fire ahead. The path to the market was blocked by burning cars. Vanessa finally woke up and the first thing she heard was the guy's caustic greeting. She looks out the window and sees the road blocked. Brandon says that because of this, she won't be able to get to her father. Patrick suggests getting there by the bypass road. It will just take longer. Brandon agrees to take the bypass, saying they'll need to find better equipment along the way. He asks Patrick if he knows of any nearby electronics stores or gun shops. Patrick exclaims a positive response, raising the index finger of one hand, and they set off on their way. He says that in the south of the city, there is an old man who owns a forge and has a lot of experience. The old man almost never leaves there, and when the virus broke out, no one knows if he is there. Patrick says the old man personally made the machete that now adorns Brandon's hand. Now that the boy has collected enough pearls, if he has the right equipment, he will be able to create a weapon that can be used. Patrick tells how as a child he and this old man used to skip classes and steal melons. Vanessa signals Patrick to be quiet. As it turns out, Brandon fell asleep during his fiery speech. Getting out of his car, the satisfied man says that they have arrived at the right place. The place hadn't changed much in the 10 years that Patrick hadn't been here. Brandon says the forge is more like a dump because the owner likes to collect all sorts of junk. He threatens Patrick to pray that the blacksmith is alive. Otherwise, he will have to dig his own grave. Suddenly, 2 zombies emerge from around the corner of the building. They have clearly noticed our heroes and are about to attack. Before they can enter, they'll probably have to do a little tidying up outside. Pointing to a bunch of weaklings, Brandon asks if one of them is the blacksmith. Brandon says that everything remains the same, he kills, and Patrick gets the pearls. Vanessa gets out of the car, asks you to wait, and says that she can also help. But Brandon didn't like this proposal. It would be better for her to sit in the car, that way she would be safe. But little Vanessa says she's fine and will be very careful outside. Patrick says she's a brave girl and has already thought of a job for her, saying he'll take care of her. Brandon lets things slide, but warns that if she gets bitten, he will not hesitate to hit her. While Brandon was clearing the way to the room, the fat man was asking the girl how old she was and what her name was. He also asked why he and the guy had different last names, since he considered them brother and sister. At this time, a man was watching the company from the building, and judging by his reaction, he was not very happy with the guests. Suddenly, his subordinate burst into the office shouting about an important message. A pistol shot immediately rang out in the darkness, and the guy's forehead was pierced by a bullet. Still holding the pistol in his hand, the mechanic merely told the prone body that he had warned it not to knock. At that very moment, another subordinate appeared in the doorway down which the poor man's body was sliding, a guy whom the main character had not helped to save. The man irritably asked the frightened newcomer what had happened. He reported that someone had come to the forge and killed all the zombies in the area. In the same irritated tone, the man said that he had already seen this and asked if there was any more information for him. The guy said that he knew the main character and met him in the northern part of the city, where he killed a bunch of zombies single-handedly. Lost in thought, the leader took a cigarette and gave his assistant some order. The girl immediately brought him a tray with instant noodles on it. The man poured some of the contents onto his plate and threw the rest of the packet into the guy's hands. The surviving guy with grayish hair desperately managed to catch food. Lighting a cigarette, the man called this gesture a reward for the guy and asked him to tell him about Brandon later. In the meantime, he decided to take his time and enjoy the show while his assistant pleased him. He also asked the new guy to remove the body from the room and tidy it up. Afterwards, the man asked to tell everyone that anyone who goes and gets even with these guys will receive a big reward. Meanwhile, the company near the forge finished dealing with the zombies. They agreed that the fat guy would inspect the house from the outside, and Brandon would inspect it from the inside. The guy kicked the door open and saw in front of him a dark, empty blacksmith shop with everything necessary for metalworking. His gaze fell on the anvil stone standing in the middle of the room. Time had passed it by, and the instrument was well preserved. Afterwards, the protagonist discovered a still-burning furnace, which meant that the owner of the forge had either been killed by zombies not long ago, or he had left shortly before the guys arrived. A fat man named Patrick appeared behind the guy and reported that he hadn't found anything suspicious outside, and most likely the blacksmith had escaped. The schoolboy asked him to give him the pearls, and to search for various scrap metal and iron together with Vanessa. He also handed the fat man a machete and warned him to be prepared for a zombie attack. Having received the weapon, Patrick asked the guy what he was going to do, since they came here for weapons, of which there were plenty around. The guy ignored the first question, and only explained that next week the local weapons would become useless. They needed something more powerful. The fat man was surprised. It had just dawned on him that Brandon was going to forge the iron himself. The guy got angry and quickly demanded that the fat man shut up and bring him the pearls. Patrick quickly darted out of the room and stopped next to the girl, commenting on how irritable the guy was. Vanessa simply asked what she could do to help them. Meanwhile, Brandon prepared the furnace and, putting on gloves and safety glasses, prepared to forge. Taking a red-hot piece of iron as a tool, he began to sharpen its ends with a hammer. A fat man watched the whole process from the side with delight, and sweat rolled down his face due to the high temperature in the room. The protagonist turned to him with a cup in his hand and asked him to pour all the collected pearls into it. With a smile on his face, Patrick quickly fulfilled the request of his now friend. After collection, the bowl with pearls was fired on all sides with flame. Within a few seconds, the black gold had melted under the high temperature and was somewhat reminiscent of a potion that emitted a green glow. The fat man leaned over the bowl and watched the gold's reaction with wide eyes. Brandon remained focused, and his next move was to make a shallow cut on his palm with the knife. The boy clenched his fist, and scarlet blood from the wound flowed in a stream straight into the green solution, creating a magical reaction in the thicket. Afterwards, the young mechanic removed the bowl from the fire and poured its contents onto the forged, still heated sword. Having combined with the metal, the green liquid began to eat into the iron with lightning speed, forming a pattern reminiscent of a thunderclap. Immediately after, the guy continued forging the remaining parts, completing the process. Meanwhile, from the opposite side, the area around the forge was being watched by enemies subordinate to Lo. The newbie was surprised at how Brandon could cut up zombies so skillfully and why their boss ordered him to bring the guy's head, while the other subordinates were determined. One of them was, to put it mildly, unwell, and was driven by perverted thoughts about the girl Vanessa. The oldest of them informed the others that there must be a reason why the boss had given Brandon such importance, and besides, all the zombies in the area had been killed, so they wouldn't have to bother at all. The bandits, who had been watching them all this time, decided that it would be an excellent idea to wait until nightfall and attack. Unsuspectingly, Brandon begins making weapons and does so with great confidence. Patrick, who was watching the case, began to think that the guy really had graduated from a technical school. He plunges the sword into some long container and makes rotating movements with it. Patrick, who took a closer look at the result, says that the texture of the blade now resembles lightning. With a wicked smile, Brandon says that now it's time to see what a mechanic can do. Vanessa was tired, but she cooked a wonderful dinner, like a hostess, for herself and the boys. She's glad the oven is still working so they can have a nice snack after their hard work. A nasty man comes up from behind, covers her face with a scarf, and says that he will take her to a wonderful place. Brandon's gaze is set and cold as he immerses himself in his work. The sharpened, perfect sword, made by the hands of a master, was placed on the table in anticipation of the continuation. Patrick admires it, saying that he has only seen this in the movies and points his finger at it. And the last thing to do, says Brandon, picking up the conductive clothespins, is activation. He touches them to the blade of the sword he has made, and electric sparks begin to emit from it. The sword is now so charged that the apparatus supplying the current has burned out from the voltage. Brandon, demonstrating and holding it in his hands, says that the second-degree sword is ready. Patrick is inspired. He shouts about his delight, saying that now he wants one just like it. Screams are heard outside the door. Patrick immediately recognizes the childish voice of Vanessa's little sister. Running out into the street quickly, they see 4 bandits who clearly did not expect this. One of them is holding baby Vanessa in his arms, and it is clear that she is already unconscious. One of the bandits, threatening the girl, tells the guys to nicely drop their weapons and go with them to Brother Lo. But Brandon is already too angry. Clicking his tongue, he swings the ball, ignoring the threats. After this, he hits the ground with a powerful blow, causing green sparks to fly off. The wave hits those standing closest, and the bandit with Vanessa in his arms, frightened by the devilry, runs away. But Brandon isn't going to stop, and swinging again, launches another wave. The bandit can no longer be stopped. He runs away with the girl because he doesn't know what to do in such a situation. They turn around and see pure horror as Brandon chops off their partner's head. The partner accuses the bandit that he should have followed the plan and not attacked the first person he met. The bandit says that they better bring the girl, because either the sword beam or Bro Lo will hit them. Brandon continues to catch up, launching another beam and already preparing to kill the assholes. Suddenly, Patrick starts shouting from behind, saying that there are zombies behind him, and this distracts him from the matter. Behind them, they see a bunch of zombies approaching them with unusual speed. Patrick notices that they came running here so quickly, as if the place was smeared with honey for them. Patrick starts to panic, thinking about running away from them, but Brandon makes a different decision. Brandon swings the ball and starts a violent mess with green rays, stunning the entire crowd. Patrick is shocked by what he sees. It looks so unreal that it goes beyond his consciousness. At this time, 2 bandits, with Vanessa in their arms, run away from both Brandon and a bunch of zombies. Patrick shouts to Brother Brady that they stole their little sister Vanessa from them, and they need to go after them quickly. Brandon yells for Patrick to take the car and go after them while he deals with the undead. Patrick, realizing that this is a good idea, rushes to the car and plans to catch up with them like old times. Very worried, he watches Brandon's battles for the last time and wishes him luck. Taking off from his place, he rushes off in his car and asks to leave the rescue of the princess to him. The bandits notice a chase from behind, also in a car, and realize that they are starting to catch up with them. They see a bus in front of them, and without thinking, they run inside together with Vanessa. Patrick brakes sharply, and most likely in front of him he sees the building that is his lair. He hesitates, because the bandits blocked the entrance with a bus, and he hasn't yet figured out what to do. There are 2 bandits sitting in the car, giggling and looking out the window, observing the situation. Since they're only faced with a fat guy, They decide this is the best time to deal with him. The guy jumps out with a knife and says that his car is pretty good. It's good that he drove it here himself. They threaten that if he doesn't want to become a shashlik, then Patrick should undress and come here immediately. The guy in the green t-shirt is not scared. He declares that he is not a weakling at all. One of the bandits with a knife shouts that he has killed more people than he has eaten chickens in his entire life. A bald guy, clutching his weapon tightly, prepares to fight off a pack of bandits. Just as he was about to fight, a green shockwave passed by, knocking back the enemies. The impact was so strong that it cut a nearby bus in half. Brandon approaches the bald guy with the ball. It was he who struck the ball with such force. He tells the guy not to stand there like a pillar and follow him, because they still need to save her. The bald guy obediently agrees with him. He makes another sword strike to clear the path of the destroyed bus and move on. People with weapons are already waiting for them, ready to attack and kill the two guys. One of the waiting men with a wide smile throws a knife, aiming it at Brandon. But the brown-haired man easily anticipates such an attack and casually deflects the knife with his sword. The protagonist then swings his weapon, creating a green blast wave towards the person who threw the knife. The remaining opponents begin throwing Molotov cocktails at the guys in the hopes of setting them on fire. Brandon swings his sword again, sending a stream of energy towards the barrels where the attackers were hiding. One of the gun-wielding bandits admires Brandon's skill, loudly praising him. He says that he has seen everything that he has done. In this complete natural disaster, there is such a powerful person like him, inviting him to come up and have a drink with him. Raising the barrel of his gun in a peaceful gesture, the man says he is very sincere with people, especially talented ones like Brandon. When the guy silently pulls his hand back to hit the man, he brings the weapon to the girl's head and advises the guy not to be so reckless. They were hospitable to his little sister, the man says sarcastically. People are kind and respectful, so he advises not to undermine their good intentions, and he also knows the power of Brandon's weapons. The man mocks the boys, asking which will be faster, his sword or the gun he is holding in his hands. A nervous companion asks Brandon what they should do. The girl is in the hands of a kidnapper, and what's more, he has a weapon. The protagonist loudly addresses a man on the balcony, explaining that he is currently working on a major project and is worried that there will be no one to help him. The man, raising his chin, visibly tensely asks if everyone is there. He says enthusiastically that he is a great man, and they will greet him in the most solemn manner. Patrick is scared. He doesn't understand why he is ready to go up to everyone at once. In addition, they have guns. Turning to him, Brandon informs him that he doesn't have to go if he doesn't want to, which takes the bald man by surprise. He wonders why he asked him only now, declaring that he does not want to get into these muddy waters. Running back, he shouts that he is leaving anyway and asks him not to be upset. The guy just clicks his tongue in displeasure and remarks on how annoying the guy is as he leaves. The schoolboy is greeted by people dressed as waiters, who bow their heads respectfully to him as a sign of respect. These same people humbly accompany him on his way to the girl's kidnapper. The building itself is full of bandits who are very aggressive towards Brandon and ready to attack at any moment. The leader himself joyfully greets him and asks if there are enough people here for Brandon. He has gathered all the guys within a 15-kilometer radius. He introduces himself by his name, bowing demonstratively in a respectful gesture. He also asks Brandon's name and what he needs them to do. The guy answers his question and says that he remembers him low, while asking if he knows how this zombie disaster happened. The tattooed man asks again, asking if Brandon really knows him. The brown-haired man points out that the man was well aware of the spread of the virus and had started stocking up on supplies in advance, and now he must be making plans to form a gang of Twilight Dragons. Lo told few people about this gang, but Brandon became more and more interesting to him. But he is much more interested in black gold, Brandon is sure. He holds one ball in his hand. Laughing loudly, the leader agrees with him and asks him to tell him everything he knows. He should know these several versions about the spread of the virus. The first is that the virus appeared as a result of the failure of foreign research into bacteria, and that this virus spreads throughout the world through migratory birds and insects. The second is biological weapons. There is no more convenient means of waging war than allowing the enemy to self-destruct, but the situation has gotten out of control. The third is even more absurd. It is of extraterrestrial origin. A meteorite containing a virus fell to Earth. The meteorite burned up in the atmosphere, disintegrated into particles, which then penetrated the human body. Surely Lo heard one of these versions before returning from the city to the countryside to gather his gang. The leader justifies Brandon's assumption. He does know one little secret about the virus. However, after much thought, he still could not figure out how to use these pearls from zombie skulls. The man asks the guy to tell him in more detail about how to use these pearls. He agrees and asks to first help him prepare the necessary props. The leader answers positively, but asks in exchange to let him look at the guy's sword. He raises the hand in which he holds the sword. Lo remembers that his little sister, the girl with the bows, is still there, on the chair, trying to scare the guy. Pointing the gun at his head, he subtly threatens Brandon with her death. The protagonist, gritting his teeth, hands the sword to the leader's servant. Unable to bear the weight of the sword, the servant can barely hold it in his hands. He tells the boss that the sword is very heavy and places the weapon next to the leader on the bench. This time, pointing the gun at the guy, the leader demands that he begin his performance. The day of judgment came precisely because of the virus outbreak. People became infected with it overnight, and a black pearl formed in their brains. These pearls are called energetic black gold, and over time they accumulate energy in the dead body. Energetic black gold adapts well to flesh and metal, and can be used to create powerful weapons. Listening to him, Lo repeats what he understood, that black gold adapts to flesh and metal. He asks if it is possible to make an elixir from it that will grant immortality. Brandon replies that some tried to eat the black gold, and most turned into zombies. Lo seizes on the word majority and interrogates the guy, asking about the others and what happened to them. To start, Brandon suggests looking at something else and warns that he will only show it once. The first step was activation, the student says, beginning his presentation. He touches the black pearl with metal rods, which creates an energy sphere. The power of the pearl's energy creates a short circuit in the electricity, turning off all the lights. This disorients everyone in the room, leaving the gang members in complete darkness. Lo realizes that the energy gold caused an electromagnetic pulse, something he didn't think was possible. Taking advantage of the moment, Brandon immediately grabs his sword, which is lying on the bench. He rushes forward and prepares to cut the leader in half with all his might. The leader manages to dodge, but his shirt flies off, which the guy successfully cuts into even pieces. An enraged man opens fire randomly at his opponent in an attempt to fight back. Brandon cleverly dodges, the bullets ricocheting and injuring the gang members. Taking the sword more firmly, the guy manages to cut the enemy in the stomach area with one precise swing. The leader of the Twilight Dragon gang, Lo, has come to an end, concludes the victorious Brandon. When he learned about the uses of black gold, he forced the Shadow Dragons to assist him in researching and developing various types of weapons from this material. Within his power there was only violence, slavery, and massacre, none of which was left untouched. Before they can succeed, Brandon must destroy them completely and not let a single one of them escape. He strikes quickly and accurately with his sword, killing all of Luo Xiang's allies. Brandon may already be a butcher in her eyes, but he can't let her witness everything that happens. He wants the girl to understand the cruelty and ruthlessness of the apocalypse, but he doesn't want her to be drawn into it. Noticing movement towards the door out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly grabs his sword, ready to repel the attack. But it turns out to be the bald guy who escaped earlier, and he awkwardly goes inside. Seeing all the corpses, he assumes that Brandon is already finished here, and Brandon confirms this. He has accomplished the purpose for which he came here, Brandon reports, grabbing a firearm. The bald guy asks in surprise if he really did all this just for the gun. He thought that Brandon came here to save the girl. Small arms are extremely rare in this area, and there are many opportunities to improve them. Thinking about improving the weapon, the guy suggests making it electromagnetic or laser. He mentions that pretending to let the guy leave and ordering him to plant the pearls in the generator beforehand was a brilliant idea. He didn't expect that one such small bead could blow up an entire generator. It was amazing. The foot of the girl hiding behind the counter accidentally touches the bottle, making a noise. Hearing this, Brandon points his gun at the source of the sound, ready to shoot the threat. She fearfully asks not to kill her, putting her hand forward to somehow protect herself. The bald guy shines a flashlight in the direction of the lady, and Brandon asks what such a girl is doing in such a place. The girl, trembling with fear, says that she was caught and brought here by the murdered Lo. He took advantage of her, humiliated and tortured her. She asks for her life to be spared. Then she probably knows where his supply depot is, the hero asks. The girl confirms his suspicions and humbly agrees to accompany them to the warehouse. The bald guy asks where she came from. She says that her house was in the western region. Her sister disappeared when this disaster happened. The girl freezes in front of the elevator. It is without power, so she can't use it. But the storage room is on the 6th floor. Brandon tells the fat man to take Vanessa and find a room with her, and he will go up the stairs with her. Among the pile of dead people, there was one living guy left, and he, trying to get out, simply asked for help. In front of him he sees a lifeless body. It is his boss, and unfortunately he is dead. He sees a black bead in front of him, and with the last of his strength he reaches out to pick it up. Looking closely at it in his hands, he recognizes the object and understands that it is energetic black gold. He remembers how the boss said that it helps one become immortal, but many who tried to eat it turned into zombies. The guy, realizing that he could die, throws the bead into his mouth and swallows it. The reaction was immediate. He was seized with convulsions, and his whole body was convulsed. Vanessa woke up on the bed, and the first thing she sees is Patrick. She asks him what happened. Patrick replies that she was kidnapped by bandits, but everything worked out because his brother Brandon dealt with them. At this time, the main character enters the room, and the little girl personally asks if he is okay. The guy downstairs found a lot of useful things, but he can't get them all by himself, so they'll start tomorrow. He didn't keep an eye on that girl. Most likely she ran away while he was looking around. Patrick finds this strange, because there is a thunderstorm outside and she can't just run away. Brandon is getting ready for bed and asks the fat man to go downstairs and lock the door so that the zombies can't get through. Vanessa says that let her brother rest, and she can help Patrick too. The fat man is touched by her concern. There is a thunderstorm and heavy rain outside. Raindrops are drumming on the glass, making a pleasant sound. A girl with blonde hair takes a shower and, closing her eyes, enjoys the moment. The door opens and a man looks in, asking if she's finished showering. Vanessa is outraged because he sees her naked and asks him to leave there. The man replies that she cannot drive him away in her own house. He was only interested in the situation in order to move on to the next act. The girl is angry because now she understands what the man's original goal was. The man makes a terrible grimace and asks who else could have given shelter to a girl who has been wandering the streets for several days. He is very glad that she did not mutate, but there is no such thing as a free lunch. For the shelter he provides, he wants her to pay with her body and tries to climb into her booth. Trying to defend herself, she holds the door with all her might and starts screaming for help. But unfortunately, there is a thunderstorm outside and no one will hear her screams except for stupid zombies. Suddenly, the wall behind them collapses, as if someone had somehow tried to get inside. The man got scared, grabbed a knife to defend himself and started watching to see who would appear. It was a huge monster, whose body was twice the size of an ordinary man, and it killed men in one go by piercing his body. The girl, who was watching what was happening, became frightened and hid behind a nearby wall. In front of her stood the same guy who ate the bead, because of which he turned. The girl screams in fear that a monster is standing in front of her, and he doesn't even know that he has turned into one. The guy tries to deny what is happening, and repeating that he is not a monster, he wants to turn back. He doesn't understand why he has changed so much, and doesn't look like the usual zombies walking the streets. The girl guesses that he is not a brainless monster, but she cannot figure out what he is. The guy says he was shot and was dying, but after eating the bead, it was as if he was turned inside out. Jessica asks herself to repeat what she just heard to make sure she understood everything correctly. He says he had nothing else to do, so he tried to eat the gold, thinking it would save his life. Jessica starts to get angry and scream when she hears the name of a guy she knows in the guy's story. She comes up to him and grabs him by the hair, asking where that guy is now, and when was the last time he saw him. The last time he came to Shinan, he cut everyone down with some kind of strange energy ball. The girl asks the guy to take her to that place, and she will tear Brandon to pieces. The guy says that they won't be able to defeat him because he is too strong and asks what happened. Jessica says that it is because of him that she wanders, looking for shelter, and that she hates him with all her heart. She's outraged that this guy just finished off a man in a second, and she thinks he's not strong enough. The guy replies that he doesn't know how it happened. There's barely any energy in it, and he can't control it. With bitterness and hope in his eyes, he asks the sweet girl if she is afraid of him. This question seemed very funny to her, and loud laughter broke out throughout the room. Touching the face of the guy who turned into her, she says that he is very strong and powerful. She just needs him to help kill him, Brandon. A girl named Jessica asks the monster for a favor, promising that in return she will fulfill any of his wishes. The monster, holding the girl in his huge hands, agrees to the deal and expresses his sympathy for her. Jessica, clearly pleased with the monster's answer, forced a slight grin. Suddenly, clutching his head with his hands, the monster begins to scream tensely at the top of his voice. The weather was clear outside, and the sun's rays illuminated the windows of the huge building. The main character is about to put his weapon in his bag, while a stocky guy in the background is looking at a package of noodles with interest. Patrick, turning to his comrades, suggests that they all leave the building. A group of 3 people carry supplies and carefully descend the stairs. The guy in the green t-shirt is surprised to see that the roof of his Jeep has been damaged. Because of what happened, the guy in the t-shirt is unable to come to terms with this situation and begins to cry bitterly. The fat man wonders how the car's roof could have been so damaged. The main character decides to help his bald comrade, which surprises him. Suddenly, with one swing of his sword, he removes the broken roof of the car. Having removed the top, the car now takes on the appearance of a real convertible. The bald guy is happy that his car is working well again. Patrick also asks the main character where they should go next. The fat man enjoys the moment while driving his convertible. Suddenly, zombies began to appear out of nowhere, shouting throughout the area. A group of school children, gripped by panic, ran as fast as they could, trying to escape the herd of zombies that were relentlessly pursuing them. Not expecting to meet his classmates, the boy is surprised that they are still alive. A boy and a girl, clutching each other, run in terror from the zombie invasion. Sharply twisting her leg, the girl complains that she is unable to continue moving, to which her classmates react with alarm. Suddenly, the main character instantly cuts off all the zombies' heads with his sword. The group of school children stood in silent amazement, their eyes wide open at what they saw. The boy's classmates were shocked to find him in such an unexpected place. Brandon greets his classmates, not expecting to see them. The classmates, breathing a sigh of relief, began to thank the guy for saving them from the zombies. One of the boy's comrades, impressed by his sword, asks with interest where he got it. The boy decided to ask his classmates where they were heading. The fair-haired guy said that they heard about a camp with survivors, where they were going to go, but were afraid of zombies along the way. One of the classmates, pointing to the car, asks Brandon to give them a ride. A short-haired classmate plaintively asks a guy for food, because they haven't eaten anything since yesterday. The girl looks worriedly at the boy's classmates through the car window. Unable to bear such pressure from everyone, the guy shouted loudly at them. The protagonist claims that there is not enough room in the car for all of them, but they can share food if they help them with one task. Two of the hero's comrades quickly agree to his proposal. Brandon turns to the fat guy to explain what they have to do. Patrick, leaning out of the car, beams with happiness that he has finally been assigned the task. A boy asks his classmates to loot dead zombies while he deals with other zombies. The fat guy begins to explain what they will need to do. He shows them the thing that they will need to pull out of the zombie. The classmates are at a loss at the challenge that lies before them. The girl tells the others that there is nothing complicated about this matter. While the girl was forging a thing out of the zombie, the guy watched all this with disgust on his face. The fat man gives the boys tools for extracting green pearls from zombies. The guy's blonde friend doesn't understand why he needed these green things. The boys began to forge the black pearl with great reluctance. The fat guy is delighted with the large amount of pearls collected in the bag. The young man asks the fat man to share his food with his comrades, while the fat man admires a job well done. After which the fat guy responds with indignation, not wanting to give up his food. Starving Patrick and his friends compassionately begged Brandon to keep the food. The only thing that brought pleasure at such a time, while behind them stood another guy and a girl, their hands folded into a pyramid. The next moment, the sound of twisted metal shook the street, and the steel monster landed on the hood of a car standing centimeters from the group of friends, like a meteorite, causing Brandon to flinch. This monster was unknown to the group except for Brandon, who was shocked that one of the black metal users appeared in front of them, and in broad daylight. Brandon needed to act quickly. There were too many people around him who were restricting his opportunities and room for maneuver. He called for everyone to run. In the blink of an eye, he drew his blade and swung it at Steel's throat, feeling that the fight needed to end as quickly as possible. The monster's agility was astonishing, and with truly ballerina-like grace, he dodged the blow and jumped back several meters, landing in front of Brandon. But the swordsman's feelings, driven to the limit, were caught by the clapping of hands. Jessica intervened in the fight. The blonde, with undisguised joy and a smile on her face, said that she had finally managed to find Brandon. The classmates couldn't believe their eyes. Jessica, alive and full of strength in all her glory, was now standing before them and smiling, even though her cold corpse should have become food for worms. Having casually greeted her classmates, Jessica only grinned at their surprise. She had been through too much for the sole purpose of seeing Brandon's mortal body give up its last breath in agony, which she immediately informed him about. The blonde pointed her finger at Brandon, commanding him to attack, a satisfied grin never leaving her face. But Brandon didn't understand the whole picture. Jessica was ordering a monster. That was something new. Brandon couldn't believe that Steel and the blonde were working together in concert. Something was wrong here. Their mutual assistance was unnatural, wrong, and incomprehensible. The monster was rapidly approaching the swordsman, and Brandon prepared for the attack, taking a stance and raising his sword at the ready, covering the fiend with curses. The monster was already a couple of meters away from the guy, and Brandon was already preparing for contact. But the fireball landed with an explosion and a crack right between the duelists, blinding both with the bright light of the flame. The attention of all the people on the street was drawn to a humanoid figure, but terribly thin and elongated. The body of this monster was engulfed in flames, and a deer skull instead of a head emitted a roar. A light breeze rocked the yacht and gently caressed his hair. A man in a small bay enjoyed peace and relaxation, for the zombies could neither swim nor fly. This calming feeling of security was also shared by the waiter, who topped up the champagne glass in time. The fat man with the Cuban cigar was in a contented mood, fueled by the prospect that, besides them, the bay was filled with other yachts and other vessels from which resources could be extracted if necessary. The idyll was broken by a deafening explosion, which instantly wiped the blissful smile from the face. An explosion occurred on a ship to the side of their yacht. The fat man and the waiter peered into the fire, trying to discern the cause of the explosion. A shadow flew out from there, the fire spawn like a meteorite, rapidly approaching the yacht of the two men, its deer-like mouth spewing flames, and its claws did not bode well. The scream of horror and fear seemed to be heard for kilometers around. The appearance of the creature was so frightening that the couple's legs felt like lead. They could not take their eyes off the figure, all the while continuing to scream. The crackling sound of the burning ship was joined by a deafening explosion from the yacht. The monster jumped onto the roof of a nearby building and seemed to be looking out for something. Brandon couldn't believe his eyes. Another black metal user was right in front of him. One user of such power was rare, but two of them, and so close to each other, it was too suspicious a coincidence. Jessica was no less surprised than the swordsman. She also saw this fire creature for the first time in her life, not even suspecting that there were other users besides Steel. The blonde asked Steel if she was familiar with this fire spawn, but to her surprise, Steel was also seeing this creature for the first time. Fire wasted no time while everyone was pondering his person. He pushed off with force and pounced on Steel, trying to pierce the latter with his skinny limbs. The fiend crashed into Steel, but did not cause him much harm. The two monsters grabbed each other, but in the end, Fire came out on top, trying to bite Steel's neck and head with his jaws. Steel grabbed the fiend's paws with his hands and kicked the monster away from himself, sealing Fire into a nearby car, creating a crater where Fire had made contact with the car. While the two symbols of destruction were trying to destroy each other, Brandon decided to take advantage of the moment and escape from this dangerous place. Quickly informing his friends about it, Patrick was sobbing with resentment towards the monsters. Their fight had destroyed the car that contained all the food and supplies. For a moment, he even forgot about the danger of their situation. Brandon's scream quickly brought him down to earth. He shouted to his friend that they could still find supplies later, as well as transport. But now they needed to find a safe shelter. Friends. Vanessa, Patrick, and Brandon rushed from their seats down the street, surrounded by people who were also trying to find shelter away from this horror. But Jessica wasn't going to let them go that easily. The blonde drew the monster's attention to the escape of their targets. The most important of all was Brandon, who had the necessary information. But the steel monster did not help her. He was still tied up in battle with the fire one. But the fiend spat a fiery gout at the fleeing ones, rapidly approaching the girl with the pink rabbit backpack. Vanessa could already imagine the pain from the blow. The shockwave from the blow slapped the classmates running ahead of their friends, and a small shadow could be discerned in the column of rising flame. The fire strike flew past the girl and latched onto a tree, the flames instantly spreading along its entire length. The force of the impact knocked down a tree, which, falling right across the road, separated the friends from the rest of their classmates with a wall of fire. The classmates hesitated, but Brandon quickly brought them to their senses with a shout. He ordered them to run away from there quickly and find shelter. Patrick was overcome with fear. He did not understand what to do or where to run. In a panic, he turned to Brandon for advice. The swordsman looked around and noticed the entrance to the underground parking lot. Not the best place, and closer than desired, but nevertheless safer, as if they remained in place. Brandon quickly alerted his friends to the discovery, and they rushed into the safety of the underground parking lot walls, nearly colliding with cars and tripping. The battle was in full swing. The monsters, like hungry lions circling the edges of their cage, circled each other and grinned. While no one had yet been harmed in the conflict, but no one had emerged victorious either. It seemed that the fiend was devoid of any kind of intelligence and reason. However, Steel decided to seek luck and tried to reason with Fire, first offering to simply talk and conclude a truce. Despite their contentious first meeting, Steel inquired about Fire's appearance, asking him if he had appeared in the same way he had, by eating a piece of black metal. It seemed that the Fire One's eyes were looking into the past. Steel One said something familiar. Incomprehensible sounds were heard from the fiend's mouth. Steel One could only understand the word about black metal. The body of the Fire One began to thrash about in wild convulsions. It writhed as if it could feel the heat emitted by the flame on the body of the fiend. It clutched its head. Fragments of memories flashed before the Fire One. He clutched his head, which was bursting with pain. He remembered himself naked and tied to the bed, and a naked man leaning over him, forcing him to swallow a piece of black metal. These rich psychos did terrible things to him, the memories of which brought pain and suffering. The Fire One remembered everything, all the pain, all the fear and despair. The monster fell to his knees and spewed fiery flames into the sky, angrily swearing revenge and extermination of all who made him suffer. Steel looked at all this with silent sadness. He wanted to console this power user. He assured that he understood everything that Fire felt. He also ate the black metal. They could help each other. They had no reason to be enemies. Jessica didn't share Steel's feelings. She asked him irritably how much longer they would waste their precious time here, while Brandon was running further and further with every second, and the chance of catching him off guard again was extremely low. She asked if Steel really wanted to bleed Brandon, because the opportunity to do so was melting away with every second of delay. In the heat of battle, they didn't even notice where he had disappeared to. But Steel calmed her down, assuring her that he was able to track this group by smell, which meant that not all was lost. Fire listened to their dialogue with curiosity. Having shed his initial rage from the fight, the fire monster became curious about the person Jessica and the steel monster wanted to find, who explained to the fire monster that the guy they wanted to find was capable of reversing their monstrous metamorphoses. The Fire One instantly became excited. The hope of returning to his human form flared up in his loins, and he decided to help them find the guy. Out of breath, Brandon, Vanessa, and Patrick were already drenched in sweat from running through the underground parking lot, and although it seemed like they had managed to escape the monsters, the quiet street was deceptively calm. Literally a moment later, a white foreign car landed with a crash a meter away on a group of friends, scaring them to death. The steel monster threw up its arms, blocking the way further. It noted that Brandon in his naivety believed that their duel was over. The monster arrogantly demanded from Brandon all the information he had regarding the energetic black metal that was the culprit of their metamorphoses, before Steel killed Brandon and warned the man to tell the truth. Brandon was irritated and angered by the monster's bloodthirstiness and pomposity. He wasn't the type of person to cry when his life was threatened, and not a single bit of information would come out of his mouth today. But the threat to his friends' lives required him to act quickly. Brandon ordered Patrick to take Vanessa to safety while he himself engaged the monster in battle, buying time for his friends. They had only taken a few steps when the other side of the parking lot was blocked by another creature, engulfed in flames, as if it had just escaped from the devil's zoo. The fire monster bared his teeth, and Patrick stepped back, saying that they were surrounded and couldn't get out of here that easily. Jessica reveled in the superiority of the scene that opened up to her. She noted that in their situation they would not be able to hide from her, certainly not with two monsters at hand. Brandon did not want to involve his friends in the conflict, and shouted at them not to approach him, and not to interfere in the conflict, hiding on the shore. Steel's patience ran out, and with a roar and incredible force, he pushed off from the spot, rapidly closing the distance to Brandon, and bringing his paws forward for a fatal blow. Brandon was a seasoned warrior. He read his enemy's movements, and his honed senses allowed him to dodge the backlash. Dodging, he managed to get his pistol out in one jerk, and although his position did not give him much opportunity to aim, he squeezed the Korok. The bullet hit Jessica in the area of her right collarbone. The place where the bullet had made its way was stained scarlet, and a hole appeared on the right side of her shoulder. Steel instantly froze in place. He did not have time to understand what happened. Turning his head, he only managed to notice Jessica's screaming and falling body. Steel didn't have time to get his thoughts in order, when Brandon's pistol again doused Jessica with a wave of bullets. Steel didn't have time to cover his partner, and the bullets again riddled the girl. The steel monster opened up, which Brandon immediately took advantage of, raising his blade to strike at the confused monster. A roar coming from behind the guy made Brandon turn around in time, because the fire spawn, opening its mouth and arms, jumped, getting ready to pounce on the guy with a roar. Brandon somersaulted and dodged the throw, but the fiend, opening its mouth wide, unleashed a stream of flames straight at the boy. Brandon held back the fiery whirlwind with his blade, which cut the stream of flame to the sides, but such protection greatly tired the swordsman. Vanessa, hiding behind a column, was amazed by Brandon's strength, but she was not going to hide behind a column so easily. The column was behind the fiend, and she took a tomahawk from the hem of her dress, which she threw with all her remaining force at the fire monster. The blow landed right on the monster's skull, but the skinny beast turned out to be tougher than it looked. And nevertheless, the deadly stream of flames stopped, and the fiend turned its attention to the girl. Patrick ran up to Vanessa to take her away, but the monster had already turned its fiery body towards them, its mouth wide open. But this second's respite was enough for Brandon to strike from a distance. He sent a green wave cutting through everything in its path towards the fiend, but the blow hit the pipe above the monster. From the split pipe above the fire monster, a stream of water gushed straight down, rolling over the fiend and leveling the flames of the monster's body. Brandon instantly approached the frozen monster, now unfettered by the monster's hot flames, and with a slashing blow, the monster's paw crashed onto the concrete. Now that the fire monster was no longer a threat, Brandon turned his full attention to the steel monster, who was gently holding the wounded Jessica close with his paws. The steel muzzle turned angrily towards the guy. The monster promised that Brandon would pay for everything very soon, if only he had patience. The steel monster and the fire spawn galloped into the darkness of the tunnel, leaving the scene of their recent skirmish with a crash. Brandon fell to his knees on the floor, plunging his sword into it. This fight had left him very tired, but the cries of a worried Vanessa were already rapidly approaching him. Brandon looked exhausted, but Vanessa calmed down a little when, after asking about the wounds he had received in battle, the swordsman denied any presence of them. He was unharmed. The guy still hadn't recovered from the fight, because meeting two users was already a rarity, and the fact that they were still alive was pleasant for Brandon. Patrick noticed that Brandon used the word user, not monster. The swordsman knew much more, perhaps even more than these two users, but he was in no hurry to share the information. But Brandon relaxed and delved into explanations, saying that the users were former people who had consumed the energetic black metal. He emphasized that in most cases, after such an event, people simply turn into zombies, but some have a chance to merge with the metal and gain greater strength and abilities. The monsters they encountered today were even rarer specimens, for they had managed to retain their intelligence and common sense. Throughout the entire story, Patrick's mask of surprise and incomprehension never left his face. After the story ended, Patrick asked where Brandon got all this information from. But the guy, as always, showed his mysteriousness. Now was not the time or place to delve into these explanations, because it would become an even longer story. They were already heading out of the ill-fated parking lot, accompanied by a little whining from Patrick about the property damage during this fight. But Brandon thought about everything that had happened. He came to the conclusion that their world had completely changed. It was no longer what it used to be, and the apocalypse was having an ever stronger impact on their world. The hours of weakness were over. It was time to do something about it. He had to be strong and stand in the way of all the madness that had fallen upon their world. The pouring rain left them soaking wet and desperate to find transportation. Patrick swore when the next vehicle they looked for was unusable. But nevertheless, everything was not so bad. Because the cars they encountered contained supplies and resources, Patrick was just carrying a bag of supplies out of the car, when only now the whole picture of destruction was revealed to him. There were wrecks of foreign cars everywhere. The greatest concentration of them was at the exit from the underground parking lot, where there were indeed intact and working examples, which, unfortunately, they were unable to use due to the rubble. The downpour was getting heavier, and Patrick found a couple of raincoats, which, by the way, did not really protect from the water. Patrick suggested that they take shelter from the rain, after which they could continue their search for transport. Brandon was considering this proposal when his gaze fell on Vanessa. The girl's eyes were strangely lingering on the surroundings, and her mouth narrowed into a line. The guy asked the reason for such behavior. Vanessa replied that she had been here in the past and remembered that an old friend of her father's should be somewhere nearby. The girl offered to go with her, said that they would have to go not far towards the mountains, and pointed in the direction with her hand. She said that she knew Dad's friend and that he was a good man, although a little strange, and that he has a big house with high walls that zombies can't get through, and lots of computers. The fat man was surprised that there were so many computers, but noted that the supermarket would be more useful to them. They asked the girl to show them the way and suggested that her father might be there. But then zombies appeared in their path, standing like a wall in front of them, and their sophisticated mouths were very close. The road turned out to be blocked, and now the guys would have to advance by fighting, but they had no idea how to do this. But then some monster tore off the head of the nearest zombie. Splashes of stinking flesh flew everywhere. And then, with 2 fingers, he pulled out some kind of ball from the remains lying on the ground and squeezed it tightly in his fist. The monster said that this black gold should be enough, and his eyes flashed, and then in one leap, he jumped towards the house located nearby. At that time, there was a fire monster in the house, and its face was no less ugly than the monster's. The monster flew into his window with one swing, clutching the ball in its fist. The monster moved towards him. And nearby, in the next room, the golden-haired girl Jessica lay on the bed, moaning in pain, dying from her wounds. The monster exclaimed that he had brought the girl black gold and handed her his precious burden. Jessica asked to give her everything she had because her condition was getting worse with each passing minute. The monster doubted that Jessica would be able to eat it all, because even one ball was enough for the changes to become irreversible. The girl shouted for it to give her all the black gold and leave. She was shaking with fever. Her eyes were shining. And I shout to you again, don't forget to share your impressions in the comments. Have a nice day, dear YouTube viewer. The monster went back to the fire monster to ask him what they should do now. The fire monster asked if she had eaten everything, and the monster replied that he doubted it. The fire monster said sadly that he had seen others being forced to eat these black pearls, and the consequences were terrible. He did not die, but became like this. The beast said that he didn't want Jessica to die because it would be very bad for all of them. The fire monster said that he had cauterized her wounds, but without special treatment she would die, and she absolutely needed the black gold. The monster wilted, and it seemed Jessica had no choice but to eat the black gold. The fire monster was full of hope, and said that it would be nice if she could undergo the mutation and be like them. After all, then there will be no need to be afraid of anyone. She will become the same monster as they are, and no zombies will be scary to her. You can kill whoever you want and take revenge for everything that happened to them and to many other people. But the monster objected that there were still people like Brandon, and showed his hands, which did not regenerate after being hit by that guy. The fire monster replied that Brandon was strong and his weapon could extinguish his flames, so it would not be easy with him. They decided to torture him to find out the secret of black gold and return to their human form, because they saw no other way. The fire monster said his name was Bo, and looked sadly at his fellow sufferer. The monster replied that his name was Shen, and that he also wanted to become human again, but not be afraid of zombies. At this time, the young man cut the zombie in half with his shining green sword, and the pieces of flesh fell in a heap on the ground. The fat man asked the young man if he was okay, because he was terribly pale, and suggested that they first find a place where they could rest. He said he was fine, and asked Vanessa how far it was to her father's friend's house, since it was not safe to stay there. The girl said that they needed to go through the tunnel, climb the mountain, and they would be there. But the tunnel turned out to be full of water, because the drainage system was clogged, and there was so much water that one could simply drown. But there were wooden planks there, and the guys suggested that Vanessa sit on them, and they would push her. They descended into the tunnel and began their advance towards the girl's father's friend, pushing the boards on which the girl was sitting in front of them. Patrick was shaking. It was dark and scary, and he kept asking if zombies could dive, but no one answered him. The girl only said that she had to go just a little further, although it was difficult to see in the pitch darkness. Her face looked especially pale against the darkness of the tunnel, but she didn't look particularly frightened. Suddenly, the young man's feet began to sink into some kind of viscous substance, and he fell deeper and deeper. He tried to grab onto something with his hands, but soon almost completely fell somewhere. Meanwhile, the monsters noticed that the rain did not stop, and the water was not going anywhere. Shen decided to discuss the situation with Jessica, and went to her room. He was very worried. The girl sat hunched over on the floor, her head hanging limply, her hand covering her face. And when she looked at Shen, she looked terrible. Thick cords of blood vessels appeared on her face and all over her body. It seemed like she had begun to mutate. Bo, left alone, became nervous. He could not understand what was happening, because everything was not as usual. The entire building was shrouded in purple flashes, which were especially bright in the darkness. Meanwhile, Brandon found himself next to a girl standing with 2 security guards, who asked him where his fellow mechanic was hiding. He spat and told her, the stinking bitch, to stay away from him, because otherwise he couldn't vouch for himself. And then the main character felt that his hand could not grab onto anything, and he fell into darkness. He woke up in some unfamiliar place, reminiscent of a hospital. The guy was lying on the bed and couldn't understand what was happening. He tried to sit up and felt his head spin, and he groaned at how weak he was. Then Vanessa ran up to his bed, and was very glad that he had come to his senses, despite the fact that he still looked very exhausted. The girl said that they were at her dad's friend's house, and that they were now completely safe. The fat man came and brought Brandon food and reported that he had been unconscious for a whole day. He was offended that the schoolboy was not too happy with them, and said that they were dragging him with all their might. Brandon hesitated because there was such a strong wind and rain, and it would be difficult for them to drag him here in such weather. Vanessa's dad's friend entered the room and also said that he didn't understand how they got to him. He said he found it hard to imagine how a student, a fat man and a girl, could get past a zombie. Vanessa exclaimed that Grandpa Henry had already seen everything, because everything was right in front of his eyes, and he could answer his own question. And she said that when Brandon lost consciousness, she and the fat man didn't know what to do. They were completely confused. And if it weren't for the video surveillance system, they would have had a hard time, because a horde of zombies was wandering nearby, and the guys were in danger. Grandfather Henry saw them, recognized Vanessa and took them away, because the girl was his friend's daughter, and he could not leave her in such a situation. The girl said that thanks to her grandfather they were able to get here, and she smiled. She was glad that everything ended this way. Brandon hesitantly asked his grandfather if he had seen everything, narrowing his eyes, not yet sure how to feel about his grandfather. He replied that it was hard not to see how Brandon chopped up those zombies like he was cutting vegetables, and asked what kind of weapon he had. The protagonist thanked Grandpa Henry for saving him, but replied that it was difficult for him to say anything about the weapon, and that it needed to be returned to him as soon as possible. He felt sick again, and Vanessa cried out to her brother to take care of himself. Brandon felt like swinging his sword had taken a lot of his strength, and he fell to his knees. Grandpa Henry said he forgot to introduce himself and squinted, his white beard moving comically. It turned out that he could be called simply Dr. Henry, and that his research institute was located here. Then Brandon remembered that Dr. Henry was a famous scientist who researched zombies and gave the name to the energetic black gold. He remembered how the doctor had been like a sent-down sage to the mechanic, and now he was standing next to him. The boy asked the doctor if his name was really Henry and gave him a distrustful look. Grandfather laughed and said that he had awarded himself this doctorate degree, but in fact, he only worked part-time at this institute. However, the doctor's interest in the weapon is genuine, and Henry asked the schoolboy to give him the opportunity to study it for the sake of the future of humanity. And Brandon agreed, especially since perhaps these are not just similar names, and the doctor really is that same famous scientist. However, the guy said he had something better, folded his arms across his chest and smiled. Seeing the questioning expression on the doctor's face, he replied that he could provide a live zombie. The doctor led the protagonist to the room where the weapons were kept. Vanessa and Patrick followed them down the corridor. He said he only scanned the weapon and found something interesting, but didn't touch anything else. The doctor was surprised at how easily Brandon picked up the weapon, although he himself had difficulty dragging it here. The guy looked around and noted with respect that the doctor's working conditions were quite good. If you use all the equipment here, you can create an even more powerful weapon. Dr. Henry was surprised and asked if the student had really created it, and he confirmed it. The doctor was excited. He really wanted to know how it happened. He was full of curiosity. But Brandon said the process of creating the weapon would remain a secret, otherwise he wouldn't catch zombies for research. At this time, on the computer screen, the fat man said that if he was given something tasty, he would think about it. And then he reported that a man named Brandon, a high school student, 18 years old, 3rd year, Class A, and Patrick could not be found. Vanessa sat in front of the control panel, typing on the keyboard and watching what was happening outside the window. Dr. Henry walked into the girl's room with 2 cups in his hands and called her by name. He praised her for trying to find survivors outside and offered her some tea. The doctor said he was sorry they hadn't found her father yet, as the CCTV only covered the coastal area, and it was still teeming with zombies. The girl took a sip from her mug and said that Henry was very good, and that she was sure her father would be all right. Grandfather laughed, but noted that he wasn't sure everything was okay with the 2 who came with her. After all, that student doesn't seem like an ordinary person, since he managed to master high technology at such a young age. Dr. Henry noticed that the student had a malicious look, the kind that only murderers have. Then, an indignant fat man entered the room and yelled that it was forbidden to discuss people behind their backs. The old man told the girl that he didn't trust the fat man, and that he found him suspicious when, behind his back, the fat man with a bag of chips didn't scold the old man for gossiping. Patrick, wearing yellow glasses, pointed his finger at the old man and told him that the old man was suspicious because he was alone in a huge laboratory. On the roof of the building there was a helipad, completely flooded with water from the rain. And below there was a large park with a bunch of cars. And also nearby there were long rows of fuel tanks. The fat man said that the laboratory also had huge compartments with clothes, food, and other things. The grandfather listened with a cup in his hands, and a girl with 2 tails sat on a chair nearby. But the grandfather could not stand the accusations. He shouted at the fat man that he did not understand anything at all and did not know what he was doing there. The old man pointed his finger at the fat man, who was angry and shouting that he had foreseen the day of judgment and had prepared himself while the others thought he was crazy. Henry continued to shout about how they all lived in his lab, ate his food, and continued to blame him for something. The old man considered them ungrateful. The fat man shouted that he didn't believe that the old man was saving all of humanity, since he had placed cameras all over the coastal area. But the old man replied that it was only thanks to these cameras that he had managed to save them all. The girl tried to calm them down. While they were screaming, suddenly someone came up to the fat man and stuck something into his neck. Patrick turned around and looked at the young man. The fat man was outraged. Brandon ordered him not to move and injected a dose of blood into the test tube. The fat man turned around and asked the boy why he had stabbed him in the neck, to which the young man replied that he needed to take a portion of blood. The protagonist replied that the first wave of zombie mutation would begin very soon, and they needed to prepare, as there was little time left. The young man turned his back on the old man and the fat man, and as he left he told them that even greater trials and troubles awaited them. It was pouring rain outside. All the streets were flooded. A crowd of zombies was walking waist-deep in water, and a guy watched all this in horror. The blonde man squatted down, turned to his classmates, and told them the sad news that they were surrounded by zombies on all sides, and there was nowhere to run. The brunette said that, as luck would have it, all the roads around were flooded because it was raining. The girl next to him covered her face with her hands and cried because she didn't understand what to do next. Next to them sat a classmate who was crying over a girl lying on the floor. The brunette was lying on the cold floor and was covered with a dirty sheet. The blonde man remembered his lost classmate, and his classmates were panicking next to him, thinking they would die in this building due to lack of food. But the blonde boy objected to them that there was something else, and showed small green balls on his palm. His classmates were puzzled as to what they were. He said that when he helped Brandon fight the zombies, he hid a few balls for himself. Since he saw one person eat such a ball and turn into a monster, the blonde thought that maybe he should do the same. His classmates were shocked and asked him not to do this, as it meant he would be taking his own life. Feng nervously clutched the green balls in his hands, thinking that if they had strength, they would be able to break through the zombies and everyone would be saved. While they were discussing this idea, one of their classmates pointed in the direction where something strange was happening. Next to them, a black and purple tornado was rising on the roof of the building. Lightning was swirling around this tornado. The boys froze in amazement and horror. They looked at this miracle of nature and thought that a tornado would soon hit the city. Meanwhile, in the laboratory, Brandon was welding parts of some invention. He was so engrossed that he didn't notice anything around him. He didn't even notice how the fat man was watching him work. But he didn't know what the young man was doing. At this time, an old man in orange clothes approached the fat man and said that the guy was working on new equipment that could withstand an attack by mutated zombies. The young man thought that all the zombies would become black-spined and fire-breathing, since they had already met them along the way. The fat man said that then it would be the end for them all. They started arguing again about the fact that there were no weapons in the old man's laboratory. The old man objected that it was a scientific center, not a fortress, and Patrick said that they needed to defend themselves with something. While they were arguing, a girl ran up to them, screaming and calling for Grandpa Henry. The men immediately turned to the little girl. She had been watching the coastline through cameras all this time, and in one of them she saw her father. Patrick asked Vanessa if she was sure about this, and the old man was surprised that the girl's father had reached the coastal area. Together they ran to the cameras to check the girl's words. Having run into a room with many cameras, the girl began to show the place where she saw her father, just in case. She saved the recording to show the men. In the recording, they saw a crowd of zombies walking through the streets, but among them, a middle-aged man in a cloak was walking, and the zombies seemed not to notice him. Vanessa watched in awe as the men wondered why the girl's father wasn't being attacked by zombies. The man was wearing a blue cloak and had some kind of seaweed on his head. The girl looked at the screen with tears in her eyes. She called the man Daddy and watched as at some point her father turned towards some street. Patrick tried to cheer the girl up. Now they know that the girl's father is alive and well, and even knows some way to hide from the zombies. Vanessa smiled at the fat man and wiped away her tears. Henry took a closer look at the man and assumed that the girl's father had hung zombie remains all over himself and smeared himself with their blood. which was what allowed him to remain unnoticed among the zombies, and that zombies probably rely on their sense of smell when attacking, which was an interesting question worth exploring. While the old man was thinking out loud, Vanessa was very worried and looked at her grandfather with fear. When he saw this, he apologized for his words. The old man began to tell the girl that he understood her desire to save her father, but it was raining heavily outside, and the tunnel that led to the city was flooded. These words made Vanessa sad. She lowered her head and was ready to cry, when Patrick suggested the girl to ask her brother Brandon. Maybe he already had equipment with which they could save the girl's father. When Vanessa approached Brandon to ask about this, he answered definitely no. Since he had not yet finished with his invention, he believed that there was no need to rush into it. Brandon said that he asked not to distract him from his important task, only to bring him food. Vanessa stood upset, her hands down. Patrick rushed to the girl's aid. He shouted at the main character that he was ruthless and heartless, and could at least sympathize with the girl. Brandon answered the fat man with displeasure, saying that since he was so smart, he should help Vanessa himself. Patrick sighed nervously, as he did not expect such a question from a schoolboy. But he immediately saw the weapon that Brandon was making in his lab. It was an improved knife and a pistol. The fat man ran up to the weapon with admiration and asked Brandon about his blood being in the weapon, which allowed him to use it on zombies. Patrick grabbed the sword with admiration, raised it above his head, and noted its lightness and strength. Brandon taught the fat man how to use a weapon. When swinging a weapon, you need to control the force of the blow, otherwise the lunge will be ineffective against the zombies, and the fat man risks wasting all his strength. Patrick beamed with joy. He lovingly clutched his new sword, and promised the hero to take all his comments into account. Then Patrick picked up the pistol that Brandon had modified. The guy continued his instructions. In order to fire, you need to turn on the power source, since the shot is fired only through energy. And it is also worth considering that there is a lot of power, but the bullets are limited. Patrick even licked his lips with impatience. He looked at the weapon with adoration, but Brandon warned him that he needed to aim and not waste bullets in vain. The fat man was so inspired that he immediately grabbed all the weapons and ran off to train, forgetting that he had a girl with him who was waiting for his help. Patrick ran out into the rainy street with impatience, the fat man holding a gun in his hands and heading towards the exit. He strained all his strength and with a loud shot threw the pistol into the sky. The sound came from all sides, and a green column of light burst into the sky. The fat man laughed. Now he considered himself unique and invincible. The rain completely wet him, but he seemed not to notice it. Now it was the sword's turn. Patrick took it more comfortably in his hand and swung it. Green sparks flew from all sides. The sword could easily cut through any object. An old man was watching all this through the screen, who was once again angry at Patrick. The old man was shouting at the fat man not to wave his weapon in front of the laboratory. The fat man was so ecstatic that he continued to shout and rejoice, and call himself invincible. Patrick changed his clothes. He put on an orange raincoat and rubber boots. He had a gun in both hands, and he was not afraid to use it. The old man and Vanessa looked at the screen behind the fat man. Apparently, he was going to go help the girl's father and bring him to them. The girl was very worried about Patrick. He asked the girl if everything would be okay with the fat man, but the old man was not worried about him at all. Patrick put the earphone in his ear and checked the connection, his raincoat protecting him from the rain. The road to the city was flooded, so Patrick will have to go through the mountains, where there are no cameras and a lot of zombies, so Patrick needs to be extremely careful. Even under these conditions, the old man and the fat man continued to quarrel and call each other names. The fat man asked the old man to hand over control to Vanessa. A lone figure in an orange raincoat walked in the darkness with a weapon in his hands, until he encountered a huge number of angry zombies. The zombies sensed their prey and ran towards the fat man, who gathered all his strength into a fist and hoped to deal with them with the help of his new weapon. At first, the fat man decided to use his sword. A green trace was left by the blow from his powerful sword, which cut through the air. The zombies literally fell apart from just one blow. The fat man was inspired and joyful from his strength. He called on the zombies to attack faster, until the fat man's gaze turned towards the forest, and he saw something terrible. A huge black and purple tornado that was heading towards the laboratory, with peals of thunder and a strong wind. While Patrick was fighting off the zombies, he tried to call the old man and Vanessa, as he had to warn them about the new danger. The rain was getting heavier, and a truly lucky tornado was heading towards the fat man, ready to destroy everything in its path. The old man and Vanessa were watching what was happening on the cameras. The instruments showed that nothing good could be expected from the weather. They ordered the fat man to return before it was too late. The The fat man was very upset. He told Vanessa that he was very sorry. But until the weather changed, he would not be able to bring the girl's father back. Vanessa's grandfather reassured her that if her father could survive the zombies, then he could also take shelter from the bad weather. The girl could only agree with the old man. At this time, the fat man had already approached the laboratory gates. The rain was getting heavier. At that moment, a red alarm signal appeared in the laboratory itself. The old man became very scared and began to look for the cause of this phenomenon. The old man saw on the screen that a zombie had been following Patrick the whole time. The old man was trying to warn the fat man. Patrick came out through the gate and began to tell the old man that he had already dealt with the zombies and was dragging one to the lab. Brandon asked Patrick to bring one of the zombies alive to the lab for some of his experiments. In Patrick's hands, the zombie's eyes glowed with madness. Henry was angry and yelled at Patrick for daring to bring a live zombie to them. The old man ordered Vanessa to stay safe and ran as fast as he could to Patrick. When he reached the fat man, he had already thrown the remains of the zombie on the floor and was waiting for the old man. Patrick told the old man that he had cut off the zombie's arms and legs for safety, but the old man was amazed that despite this, the zombie continued to try to get to them. Vanessa watched from a safe place as the fat man and the old man chatted amiably, the old man thanking Patrick for such a gift. Vanessa was glad that the old man and Patrick found common ground and became friends. At this time, Brandon was in his laboratory putting various inventions on his hand and had no idea what was happening outside. Meanwhile, the weather suddenly improved, the rain stopped, and the crowd of zombies looked at the light and began to transform into something more terrifying. Some kind of monster began to crawl out of the zombies' faces and tear them to pieces. All their bodies and the remains of their clothes were torn to pieces, and some kind of monsters burst out, with menacing red eyes. Now they looked like vile red creatures, with inhuman strength and ability, able to cover great distances and develop speed and jumps. The little boy went out onto the balcony to look at the sun, unaware of the new danger that awaited him. At that moment, a monster ran onto the balcony in one fell swoop, blocking the sun with its body and frightening the boy greatly. The father heard the strange sound and rushed to help his son, shouting to his wife. But the monster had already entered the apartment and was holding the corpses of a woman and a child in both hands. The man froze in a nightmare. Monsters learned to climb multi-story buildings where people used to feel safe, but now these monsters, like cockroaches, crawled around the building. The monster climbed onto one of the floors and broke a window. 3 men stood in front of it in horror, screaming in fear and trying to run away. Brandon's former classmates also tried to escape from these monsters, running as fast as they could to a safe place in the hope of being saved. When the monster had almost grabbed the girl, an even more terrible monster stood in its way. Completely white, with unusual hands, it grabbed it and tore it into pieces. The white monster pulled out a small red ball from the red one, which remained in his hand. At this time, the rescued schoolchildren were watching this. They still couldn't believe that they had been saved, and they recognized in this white monster their former classmate who had eaten the green balls for them. A blonde sat on the roof of a tall building, watching a whole crowd of zombies move harmoniously through the city, with even more terrifying monsters standing on either side of her, who were her subordinates. The armless fire monster looked in awe at the zombies as they moved under Jessica's direction. There was a purple flame shining on the blonde's hand. She told the fire monster that it was the result of her many days of work. She was interested in where Brandon was. The gray monster replied that he had already found out Brandon's location, which was in the mountains, at a research institute, and that the monster was ready to go there himself and destroy the guy. But Jessica told the monster that this wouldn't do and that she would deal with it herself, her purple eyes shining with rage. She raised her hand above her head. The purple energy glowed brightly. The girl said that she would personally tear Brandon to pieces, since only in this way could she quench her thirst for revenge. At this time, Patrick and Vanessa were getting ready to look for the girl's father, when suddenly the alarm went off. The fat man immediately called his grandfather and decided to find out from him what the reason was. The old man replied that they should immediately return back to the laboratory, as a huge crowd of zombies was approaching them. The cameras on the screen showed that zombies were approaching the laboratory in huge numbers. Patrick and the girl ran back to the laboratory as fast as they could, and asked the old man what scale of disaster awaited them. The old man answered Patrick over the radio that perhaps thousands and thousands of zombies were coming towards them. The fat man was shocked. The fat man wondered why this happened, why they were all heading towards them. Were they the only survivors, or had they offended someone? The old man replied that he didn't know what the reason was, and perhaps they should ask Brandon if they were ready for such a danger. The fat man immediately ran to the guy. Patrick was knocking on Brandon's door and shouting that they had an emergency, that a crowd of 1,000 zombies was coming towards them. Brandon was sitting at the computer and looking at something on the screen. He answered Patrick that he was aware of the situation. The old man had just told him about this news. Patrick cheerfully asked the guy if he was ready for such an invasion, if he had a plan, and if the guy was ready to destroy them all. But Patrick was very nervous. Brandon continued to do something on the computer and told Patrick that he was not ready for such an event yet. Patrick was stunned and angry. He asked Brandon if he really planned for Patrick to fight a horde of zombies alone. Brandon sat quietly surrounded by a pile of wires and looked at the laptop screen. He calmly told Patrick that he warned them about the danger. The only thing is that events are developing faster than he expected. Brandon said that in this situation they should act together and rely on the old man. Patrick was angry. He shouted furiously that they did not have time to think of anything and needed to act now. But Brandon didn't answer Patrick, who became even more angry and walked away from Brandon's room and decided that in difficult situations, it's always worth relying on yourself. The fat man climbed up onto the roof, along long spiral staircases. Patrick climbed onto the roof and watched from afar as the crowd of zombies approached their laboratory faster and faster. The fat man was stunned that there were simply an impossibly large number of zombies, and that the walls of the laboratory would sooner or later collapse, unable to withstand such an onslaught of the undead. Patrick decided that they could not be allowed to reach the walls of the laboratory at any cost. He ran towards the blue car and was already jumping into the driver's seat. At this time, an old man and a girl were watching the fat man on the monitor screen. They called Patrick and asked where he was going. Patrick, already behind the wheel, answered them that he wanted to try to stop the crowd of monsters. He asked them to open the gates and for the old man to think of a way to save them all. And if the fat man did not return, then the old man should come up with a way for them all to be saved. Vanessa screamed at Patrick not to do such a thing, but the lab doors had already opened and the blue car was heading towards the crowd of zombies. Patrick chuckled while driving. He promised the girl that he was not going to give up so easily, and that he would show them all. Moreover, he had in his hands the weapon that Brandon had made for him, with the help of which Patrick was going to hold off the monsters. The fat man opened the car window and pointed the gun at the crowd of zombies. The green light illuminated everything around and headed towards the zombies. Patrick chuckled as he saw a bunch of monsters just lying incinerated on the ground. He thought he didn't even need to aim. The fat man was sitting in the car and stretching his hand towards the zombies. He shouted that he would incinerate them all. At that moment, he was really cool. A blonde was watching this whole action from above. She looked angrily at this whole situation. The wind blew through her hair. Her purple eyes were directed towards Patrick and the zombies. There was a feeling that something bad was about to happen. The girl did not suspect that they would have such a powerful weapon, because this only complicates everything. Patrick continued to mercilessly destroy the monsters. But no matter how many he killed, they still came with new and renewed strength, rolling in like a wave. Patrick noticed out of the corner of his eye that some kind of fireball was rushing towards his car, which hit the car and flipped it over. Patrick, overcoming obstacles, managed to get out of the burning car with difficulty. A fire monster was heading towards the fat man, and it destroyed Patrick's car. The fat man cursed loudly as he looked at the fire monster who dared to attack him from behind while the fat man was busy with the zombie. Patrick shouted at the monster that this time he was not afraid of him and fired his pistol in his direction, putting all his strength and anger into the shot. But the fire monster turned out to be more cunning and was able to jump away from the shot. And then he released a column of fire towards the fat man. Fortunately, he also managed to dodge such a blow with difficulty, after which a shootout began. Eventually, the monster realized he was losing and started running away. The fat man raised his gun in the air and shouted towards the monster. Next to him was an overturned jeep that was on fire. While the fat man was shouting at the fire monster, zombies started approaching him. Patrick focused on them in time. An old man and a girl were watching this whole scene from the laboratory. The old man was shouting for the fat man to come back, because if the zombies surrounded him, he would not be able to escape from this trap. Patrick took the advice and ran as fast as he could from the crowd of zombies. He himself was already thinking that all of this was a big trap. But another of Jessica's henchmen appeared on Patrick's path, blocking his way to the laboratory and attacking the fat man. The gray monster was a real giant. Its sharp fangs could cut a man into pieces. Patrick barely dodged this deadly blow. But as soon as Patrick was on the ground, he took out his gun and shot at the gray monster. While it dodged the weapon, Patrick managed to attack first. He took out his sword and attacked the monster's back with all his might, but it retreated, and the green shockwave went completely into the ground. The monster was shocked by the fat man's strength and power. The monster remembered his battle with Brandon and thought that he would definitely lose to the fat man in agility and dexterity. Patrick did not retreat. He attacked the gray monster from all sides. First, he shot at it with a cannon, and then he swung his sword, so that the monster had to constantly retreat to the side. Patrick joyfully shouted that he was not afraid of monsters. Jessica watched the battle from the sidelines, clearly expressing her displeasure. Behind her back, her hand was turning increasingly frightening colors, which meant that trouble was in store for the fat man. When the monster escaped, zombies began to move towards the fat man with accelerated force. He took a sword in his hand to defend himself from them. Patrick couldn't understand why the zombies suddenly became so active. Sweat was running down his face. Patrick had no choice but to fight with all his might, repelling the monster's attacks time after time, the green light from the sword and pistol flashing all the time. At some point, Patrick realized that the zombies were too fast, and he couldn't destroy them in time. He urgently needed to come up with a new plan of action, otherwise it would be the end for him. In the end, he couldn't think of anything better to do than just run away, and a huge crowd of undead monsters chased after him, raising their hands up. But he couldn't run far, because at that moment, zombies started falling from the sky, blocking his path. The fat man couldn't understand how this could even happen. That is, he still had to fight off the crowd, but this time from one that was flying at him from all sides from the sky. But when Patrick turned around, he saw that the gray monster had grabbed the zombies like they were little kittens and was throwing them at the fat man as if he was shooting Patrick with a slingshot. Patrick shot at the zombies that were flying at him from the sky and generally fought off zombies from all sides. Patrick was very angry and tired. He started running as fast as he could and asked someone to help him cope with all these troubles. But while the zombies continued to attack him, one of the women fell right on Patrick and grabbed his leg. The fat man screamed and tried to shoot the zombie so that she would get rid of his leg. But the bullets ran out, so he had to take a sword and cut off the zombie's head. A little more, and Patrick would have lost his leg or turned into a zombie himself. The fat man lay down tiredly. He watched as the zombie held his leg, unable to harm it. But there were still monsters on his path that thirsted for his death. The fat man continued to lie there, and the monsters kept running towards him. It seemed that Patrick no longer had a chance to get out of this situation alive. Then, lying on the ground, Patrick grabbed a pistol and shot at the zombies that got too close. Green sparks flew from all sides, but it seemed that this did not save the fat man himself much, and there was a risk of blowing himself up. Suddenly, a bright green beam illuminated the entire clearing. The crowd of zombies was instantly destroyed. Patrick was stunned by such a wave, and he lay down on the ground to protect himself. The gray monster watched as the green wave quickly scattered zombies all over the area. When the smoke cleared, Brandon stood in front of them, wearing an iron suit and easily destroying zombies one after another. The fat man was very happy to see the boy. He exclaimed joyfully, and was ready to run and hug the boy for saving him. In the laboratory, the old man and the girl also watched this whole battle, and were no less happy than the fat man that Brandon had arrived in time. The fat man looked at Brandon's suit with admiration, and asked the guy if this was really the deadly weapon that the guy had been working on for so long, because it was simply amazing. Brandon interrupted the fat man's admiring speech, and warned him that the enemy was still nearby. The guy asked the fat man that if he had the strength to fight further, then he should clear the left side of zombies, and he would take the right, because their main goal was to prevent the zombies from approaching the walls of the laboratory. The fat man happily confirmed that since he was no longer alone, he still had the strength to fight on. And the fat man continued to destroy the zombies, shooting at them from all sides, but more confidently. Brandon, in his special suit, also did not stand still and cleared the entire right side of zombies. Only green sparks flew from all sides. Patrick looked at Brandon and his suit with admiration, because he practically didn't even have to make any effort to destroy the monsters. After killing so many zombies, they had every chance to collect thousands of seeds from the zombies, thereby increasing their power. The fat man, deep down, hoped that Brandon would make such a suit for him too. This inspired him greatly, and he then began to destroy his opponents with redoubled force, and was very happy about it. Standing on the pole, Jessica watched this entire battle without stopping. Her subordinates told her that the power that Brandon has is simply enormous, and they cannot cope with it. Jessica was very angry. She looked at Brandon and told him that the iron could not save his life, and sooner or later she would destroy him. The force of Brandon's blow was so great that zombies flew from all sides as if they were just leaves. The old man and the girl watched the battle. The old man thought about the fact that Brandon was wearing an exoskeleton, and it didn't look like it was an invention of this time. He highly doubted that an ordinary 18-year-old guy could have assembled something like that from scrap parts. Vanessa told the old man that in fact this weapon is made from peas that Brandon collects after destroying zombies. The old man was very surprised. The old man began to ask the girl questions about this, about how these pearls looked like metal and were in the zombie's head. The old man could not understand why Brandon had hidden from him such an important fact, that the zombies' brains contained a source for weapons against them. The old man asked the girl to stay here and watch the battle, while he himself ran to the lab to dissect the zombie that the fat man had recently brought in. At this time, Jessica had no intention of giving up. The wind was blowing her hair and clothes. A huge force was rising around her, which she was going to direct against Brandon. Blinded by this power, hundreds and hundreds of zombies ran towards Brandon. They were not going to stop at anything. The fat man warned his friend that a crowd of zombies was heading there with redoubled force. Their invasion resembled an earthquake. Brandon shouted to the fat man that you kill as many zombies as come, and that he should think less. A bunch of enraged zombies took off and greedily pounced on the main character. Brandon gathered all his strength and threw the angry zombies away with a powerful blow. Grinning, Jessica ordered the zombies to tear Brandon to pieces. Some explosions began to occur in the crowd of attackers, and thus the number of zombies became smaller. During the battle, Brandon was surprised that there were zombies capable of self-destruction. The fire monster said with annoyance that the fight was like a battle between gods, and they were not able to help here in any way. In response, the gray monster mentioned that Jessica ate 7 beads of black gold and became who she is now. The gray monster told how her body was changing, constantly tearing itself apart, and that only a person with a truly strong spirit could endure such torment, which is why her hatred for Brandon was so obvious. The fire beast replied that thanks to the black gold beads she had eaten, she had not only turned into a monster, but had also become several times stronger than them. To which the gray monster replied that he didn't know how this happened, but he didn't want to experience the torment that she had to endure. Perhaps she was no longer who she was. Jessica stands next to the pole, tensing her entire body to gain as much strength and energy as possible. The zombies explode and shatter into pieces around a stunned Brandon. Brandon uses his hand to direct all the generated power towards the tower where Jessica is standing. The platform on which the girl was standing explodes and she flies off it. Landing, an enraged Jessica runs as fast as she can, her power growing ever more intense. Brandon immediately points the suit's arm towards her, which also creates electrical discharges, trying to fight off the girl's attacks. Jessica aims a horde of zombies at Brandon while Brandon tries to fight them off. With one powerful blow, Brandon gets rid of them, and Jessica falls flat on the ground. Another powerful blast of energy is directed towards Jessica. It seems that her strength is leaving her and she can no longer resist. The metal arm of Brandon's suit grips the helpless girl tightly, and she screams in pain. Brandon began to furiously interrogate Jessica, asking if she had died from the bullets that day, and forcing her to answer how many pearls she had eaten. His former classmate's hand began to glow ever brighter with magic. Brandon swung the suit's metal leg and began to press Jessica into the ground. The guy shouted loudly that in his past life he lost his arm because of her, and now it was time for her to pay for it. The gray monster decided to stand up for the girl and ran towards Brandon as fast as he could. The monster, frightened by the explosion of the guy's suit, rushed away headlong. Then the monster attacked the guy, who in turn raised his iron hand, where Jessica was, and hit the monster in the head with all his might. The fire monster was horrified by the sight he saw, as his friend soared high above the ground under the influence of the suit's unknown powers. The stunned monster screamed in shock that Brandon had killed Shan and even caught Jessica. He realized that the main character's battle mech was terrible. The monster thought that he really needed to run away from here urgently. The fur's powerful hand continued to hold Jessica tightly, causing the girl to sigh. Brandon continued to torment Jessica, asking if she was so special that she ate the black gold and was able to return to her human form, while at the same time claiming that her existence itself was dangerous, and the infection needed to be eradicated immediately. The guy squeezed the girl even tighter. She could no longer bear it and screamed in wild pain. The zombies didn't like the guy's behavior. A crowd of them gathered around him and also shouted something. Brandon was puzzled by the fact that the zombie had already begun the first stage of mutation. Vanessa panicked and started screaming at her brother that everything was bad. She claimed that there were more and more zombies around the research institute. The girl saw that Brother Patrick was steadfastly holding the defense at the main gate, but the zombies began to climb over the walls and penetrate the institute's territory. Jessica sneered that none of them would survive, and they would turn into zombies, becoming her slaves. Brandon threw Jessica into a crowd of hungry zombies. With both hands of a strong mech, the guy began to burn the zombies. The fat man was very nervous because his gun was out of bullets. Patrick, interrupting the advancing zombies with his sword, yelled that everyone here was already surrounded by zombies. The enraged zombie pounced on the fat man, who grabbed the sword with both hands, trying to somehow fight off the attacker. Patrick was sweating profusely, perplexed that a new kind of abnormal had appeared. He didn't understand why the light blade couldn't cut them apart in an instant now. The fat man felt something was wrong. More and more zombies were appearing around him. He ran as fast as he could from the crowd of angry zombies, wondering what kind of creatures they were if the light blade didn't cut them, but only slightly pushed them back, and realizing that the first stage of mutation had begun. Vanessa tried to call the fat man, asking him over the radio if he was still okay. Several zombies climbed over the wall and entered the research institute. Dr. Henry is busy in the lab and doesn't know about the situation outside yet. Patrick received an order over the radio to quickly return to the laboratory building, to which the fat man agreed. Although after walking around it, he realized that the zombies had completely surrounded the institute and he could not get inside. Brandon flew into the air and aimed his fur arms towards Patrick, grabbing him. The fat man was happy with this turn of events and asked if the guy could really take him with him on the flight. Serious Brandon didn't agree with the idea of flying. He was going to move the fat man to the research institute, since he was supposed to destroy the zombies that were infiltrating it. Having reached their destination, Brandon returned Patrick to Earth. Brandon reported that some zombies had already undergone the first stage of mutation, but despite the fact that their skin was tougher, they could still be destroyed by inflicting more blows, although they should not be underestimated, as they were more agile than normal zombies. Patrick was already dead tired and wanted to finally sit down and catch his breath, but Brandon made it clear that the zombies outside wouldn't be able to rest for now. Brandon stood on the wall that surrounded the Institute's territory, and the zombies immediately turned their attention to him. Pointing the fur at the zombies, Brandon began to burn the crowd of zombies again, not letting them get to the Institute. Patrick, sitting on the ground, asked for water to be brought to him, so that he wouldn't die of thirst, and didn't even notice how zombies were climbing over the wall behind him. From the extraneous noise, he realized that something was wrong, and turning around, he saw a zombie running towards him. Trying to defend himself from the attacks, the fat man plunged his light blade into the zombie's body. Having cut down the zombie, the fat man stepped on its body, furiously pulling out the blade. Vanessa came out to Patrick and brought him a bottle of water. After a short struggle, the fat man was finally able to sit down on the ground again, while Vanessa asked if he was okay. The girl approached Patrick, who was rummaging through the zombie's entrails, and said that she had seen this zombie on camera and that it was different from the others. Having pulled out the black pearl, Patrick was delighted to find it, especially since it was red. Dr. Henry was looking at a similar pearl in his laboratory, which, although opaque in appearance, emitted a dark greenish glow. Standing next to the experimental zombie, Henry admired the discovery, wondering if this black metal turns people into zombies or if it is a polymer that forms after turning into a zombie. He did not know how many more secrets were hidden in it. Brandon continued to fight the zombies, squeezing them, stomping on them, and burning them. When he had defeated them all, he calmed down and decided that the job was done. From behind the wall, he shouted to the fat man that the zombies had been destroyed and that he could go out and start collecting pearls. When Brandon returned to the fat man, Patrick praised him, saying that nothing less could be expected from his brother. His efficiency was top-notch, to which the guy replied that the fur was not yet finished, otherwise it would be more effective. The fat man decided to check the situation behind the wall, where the remains of the zombies looked like small hills, and he realized that it would take him forever to collect everything here. An inspired Patrick asked Brandon if he would help him create battle armor as soon as he collected the pearls, but in response, he only received that he needed to wait until the exhausted Brandon got some sleep. Out of nowhere, Dr. Henry appeared, wanting to ask something. The old man decided to ask Brandon when he would tell about the secrets of the black gold. While collecting pearls from the dead zombies, Patrick was already sighing at how tired he was, and he still had thousands to deal with. However, he was glad that it was easier for him to work with charred bodies and easier to crack skulls, although it was sad to do it alone. At the Institute, Henry was interrogated by Brandon, who asked if it was true that black gold was the zombies' energy source. Brandon confirmed this, saying that as soon as a person is infected with the zombie virus, a black pearl forms in his brain, and zombies are able to absorb sunlight thanks to an ability similar to photosynthesis, so they accumulate the required amount of energy in this black gold. Dr. Henry was very surprised by this information, reasoning that although the pearls emit green light, he was unable to detect chlorophyll or the corresponding enzymes. but he did find elements that he had never seen before. The old man became more serious. He said that the pearls were made of active metal, because when he used light and heat, it caused a strong reaction in the pearls. In addition, they have a strong affinity for blood and metals. Brandon agreed with him that there was a similarity especially to human blood. The guy explained that the zombie virus spreads faster in the human body than in the bodies of animals or plants, and therefore it is easier for people to mutate into zombies, but after a certain period of time, they absorb light and they begin the first stage of mutation. Henry now understood why the zombies behaved so aggressively at night, and lazily wandered the streets during the day or even stood still, because photosynthesis was passing by, and they were accumulating energy for the first stage of mutation. The only thing the doctor didn't understand was why the zombies were running around like crazy in the daylight today. Brandon explained to him that it was all because they were being controlled by the anomalies. The old man concluded that the anomalies were two creatures, one with black spikes and the other fire-breathing. But it was they who brought the zombies here. The guy said that these anomalies mutated after eating black gold, and they were controlled by a new super anomaly, who was also his former headman Jessica. Dr. Henry was puzzled by how the human body absorbs this metal, and if eating black gold can mutate and gain superpowers, it turns out that it is a transformation pill, to which Brandon replied that they had also researched this aspect and were confident that, having eaten black gold, the mutation was irreversible, and they tried to destroy the abnormal ones first and as quickly as possible. Henry was already confused by so much information about anomalous and super anomalous, and he also didn't understand if the zombies mutated, then it was the first stage, or already the second. He still didn't understand how Brandon knew everything. They shouldn't teach that at his school. The guy decided that he would tell everything when the time came, but also thought that it would be more valuable if the old man studied everything on his own, to which he replied that Brandon had once again piqued his interest. The doctor asked if he could study Brandon's weapon, and the tired boy told him that he would still use it, but Henry could do whatever he wanted with the weapon. Brandon asked not to be disturbed while he slept, and Dr. Henry, delighted, ran out of the room. Vanessa, standing next to Brandon, thought that she really wanted her brother to take her with him to look for their dad, but she knew that he was very tired from fighting all day. Vanessa stared gloomily at the floor with sad eyes, her head filled with thoughts. Too much had happened to her in the last few days, and even white slippers with a pom-pom could not lift her spirits. Her golden eyes filled with moisture, she felt emptiness and loneliness inside herself. Her thoughts constantly returned to her father, whom she missed so much. It was approaching sunset when an exhausted Patrick collapsed to the ground and spread out on it like a starfish on the seashore. He could no longer continue digging. However, he was not very upset about his work. He was even glad to try for a common good cause, and besides, such work allowed him to lose excess weight. Fire watched him with curiosity. Although he was still not recovered from the carnage that had led to them burying the corpses of the zombies, he consoled himself with the fact that it was all over. The fiend watched Patrick's work from a distance, from behind the bushes. They had already overpowered him and cut off his hand, finished off his acquaintances, but something still prevented him from surrendering to their mercy. He sadly came to the conclusion that he was a monster. They would not listen to him. They would not want him to show himself, when his head would immediately separate from his body. The new subspecies of zombies, the red ones, were out of control. They attacked him and almost tore him to pieces. He barely managed to escape from them. In that massacre, he used up all his strength. Fire understood that if ordinary zombies mutated into red ones, then he would have a hard time. He did not understand what to do in such a case. He jumped out of the bushes forward, when his eyes noticed a figure in the trees. It was watching his every step. It was next to him, but he did not notice. It was a carrier of black metal, also having a humanoid figure and appearance. He most closely resembled a human. Although his marble skin and the blades on his hands gave him away, he quickly disappeared from sight. The lounge was filled with the sounds of Patrick's snoring. Vanessa had already had a hard time sleeping despite the soft and cozy sofa, but Patrick's snoring completely knocked the sleep out of her eyes. The sounds of work could be heard from the workshop. Brandon took off his windbreaker, remaining in a t-shirt, and worked on the mechanism, trying to complete the design by the morning. The dirty man in the blue cloak, in order to blend in with the dead mass of zombies, finally reached the desired place. He had not made such a dangerous journey for the sake of empty hands. An unknown man crawled into the store through the broken automatic doors. Well, he's here. All that's left is to find what he wants. although the emptiness didn't inspire hope. Approaching the cashier's counter, among clouds of dust and a thick layer of dirt, he found a notebook with a single phrase. His daughter is alive and has gone looking for him. The father's heart was saddened by the pain of such a long separation. He did not know where to look for his Vanessa, but he could not be discouraged and lose hope. He had to find her. The father walked out of the store with a calm and even gait, while a horde of zombies passed by, but his cloak and zombie mannerisms reliably protected him from their bloodthirstiness. He calmly entered the flow of the horde and dissolved into it, became a part of it and one whole. They had to lead him somewhere. He had time to think about searching for his daughter. Sunbeams illuminated the walls and ceiling of the workshop, made of clad steel, the metal greedily absorbing the sun, Brandon finally reaping the fruits of his labor. Patrick's heart sank in his chest at the sight of this magnificence. His mouth opened in admiration, and his eyes could not stop looking at the buggy. Although it was difficult to say what it was, reminiscent of Batman's cars, the transport was stronger than a tank. 4 huge wheels could drive over anything. Patrick greedily drank in every inch of the car. Brandon's cold face was absorbed in his work. Patrick was bursting with curiosity. Was this transport really made of the same metal that Patrick had been digging up all day? But the best part is that Patrick will be driving this Pearl. Brandon remembered that his friend was bad at handling the robot. The car was very powerful. Made from many zombies of different subspecies, Patrick couldn't wait to take a look at the interior and try it out. His hands were just itching to grab the steering wheel and appreciate all the advantages of this thing. But Brandon said that this car handles just like all the others, and they can try it out right away during their upcoming trip. Before Patrick could respond to this, Vanessa appeared in front of the swordsman, holding the same rabbit backpack in her hands. She also wanted to try riding it, but Brandon quickly cooled her ardor. The area was teeming with new, dangerous, first-tier zombies. He didn't want to take any risks, and he didn't want to waste any more of his time on her. But the girl's face became serious. She had already been obediently sitting locked up for several days and waiting. But her patience had snapped. She wanted to find her father. Brandon became angry and threatened Vanessa that if she did not stop fighting with him, he would ask the professor to lock her in the lab. The girl's eyes were already red from tears when she couldn't bear it any longer and started sobbing again right in front of the guy, pitifully calling for her father. She couldn't wait any longer. Patrick, a witness to this scene, reproached Brandon for his behavior. He again brought Vanessa to tears, although he was not even her older brother. The professor, who appeared at the right time, was holding the repaired mechanism in his hands. His appearance diffused the situation, and the girl calmed down. The professor didn't just repair the drone, he used a special metal from which the machine was made, significantly improving the battery life. The old man suggested installing a drone on the car and using it to search and improve visibility, which he decided to leave to Vanessa, who could finally help them without risking herself. Brandon appreciated all the improvements, and despite the professor being unfamiliar with the black metal, he nevertheless quickly adapted it to the team's needs, to which the professor only laughed. Although he was not a real teacher, he still had more than enough intelligence, and he was pleased with the recognition. Luckily for Patrick, Brandon finally gave the go-ahead to leave their hideout, and the chubby guy was overjoyed. He was ready. He called the car a rhinoceros, smiling. He started the engine and was ready to race. The steering wheel felt good in his hands and cooled his skin. It couldn't be better. Brandon warned the remaining old man and girl that he would be in touch and could count on them to help with a drone that was suitable for their mission. Vanessa wished them luck one last time, assuring Brandon that they couldn't rely on her, but they should just be careful. The bladed trawl at the end of the rhinoceros cleared a path for them, and the speed allowed them to reach any point in their city in a short time. The machine had enormous power. Patrick was delighted with his new toy. He handled it as if he had been handling it all his life, bringing him joy and making his insides tremble. The rhinoceros passed its first obstacle, a road blocked by cars, as if there was nothing on the highway, and there wasn't even a scratch left on it. Patrick's face was lit up with a smile. With such transport, they had no enemies to fear, and could travel freely and safely wherever they needed to go. Brandon was thinking about where to start, remembering that Vanessa's father was seen on surveillance cameras in the area. They would start the search from there. But while they were searching, the complete absence of zombies was very strange. Patrick assumed that they had killed everyone near the laboratory. Before Brandon could respond, the rhinoceros was attacked from all sides by first-rank zombies. But fortunately, the car withstood their attacks. Some of the Reds were trying to break through the windshield or, at the very least, block people's view of the road. One of them had already pressed his face against the glass. But the rhinoceros was equipped with more than just a bladed trawl. Patrick was sure of that, and he asked Brandon what other weapons the vehicle had. At the present time, gunpowder weapons could not cause much harm to zombies, but black metal allowed for an expansion of weaponry's capabilities. Having said this, Brandon pressed a button on the rhino's console, and a moment later the machine was engulfed in green streams of lightning, tearing the zombies to pieces. Patrick was very impressed by the scene of this massacre. He noted the high effectiveness of this weapon, and was glad that the way was clear. However, Brandon planned to quickly find Vanessa's father and drive back. They killed the last zombies in the area, and the swordsman asked Patrick to drive faster. The man in the hat was intrigued by the sounds of the engine and the roar of the special zombies. While on the roof, he watched the strange vehicle with his eyes. Curiosity aroused in him. The rhinoceros took them safely to the place where the man was last seen. Fortunately, they arrived without incident. Brandon quickly gave orders. He ordered the drone to be turned on for air cover, and Patrick was to wait for further orders. Vanessa sat in front of the screen with the control panel, waking up the machine and confirming her readiness. She was glad to do at least something to search for her father. The drone circled all the upper floors of the building, but Vanessa saw only abandoned and cluttered rooms, in which the former presence of people was visible. The fat man and the swordsman were waiting in the rhino's cabin. The god drone was looking around. The lack of action was getting on Patrick's nerves. He asked what they were going to do. If Patrick was so bored with too much free time, he could have personally inspected the building. Brandon had hardly slept today and was exhausted, deciding to conserve his remaining strength. Patrick didn't want to leave the safe space of the armored personnel carrier, but he had the brilliant idea to honk the horn so that if his father was there, he would come to the sound. But Brandon didn't appreciate the idea and didn't have time to stop his friend. A deafening sound attracted the attention of hordes of infected, which Vanessa alerted them to. Brandon gave Patrick a slap on the back of the head so that bad thoughts would not visit him in the future. Patrick said with an offended tone that there should not have been a zombie here. But he wasn't too upset by the prospect of meeting the horde. The zombies gave him the opportunity to test out the entire arsenal of weapons stored within the rhinoceros. He started pressing unfamiliar buttons when, after the first of the discs, blades appeared on the wheels of the vehicle, cutting through zombies like a knife through butter. The next button activated laser cannons that fired a red cloud of thermonuclear particles, which exploded upon contact with the target. A red flash lit up the area. Patrick didn't expect such power. Vanessa asked Schumacher to moderate his ardor and be careful. Her father could come under fire. Patrick apologized and tried to be more careful, but the buttons on the panel in front of him were not labeled, and he didn't know what to expect from the next button. The next button activated the grinding millstones, which turned zombies into dust when they fell into them, and a message appeared on the console about the start of collecting black metal. Patrick had the idea that the machine could automatically hunt zombies, collecting a bloody harvest of black metal particles. Patrick was overjoyed. He tearfully thanked his friend. Brandon had managed to get to know his friend's preferences in weapons as well as in food. Vanessa noticed a lot of traffic on the other side of the street and contacted her friends to ask if it would be a problem. And a grateful Patrick still didn't calm down, even after Brandon's comments and angry actions. When Vanessa's speaker reported that she had found something, she sent them an image on the console, where 500 meters away there was an SUV, loaded with various boxes. The car looked like it had been used recently. Patrick acknowledged receipt of the information and, pressing the pedal to the floor, headed to the place indicated by the girl on the electronic map. Vanessa recognized her father's pickup truck, flying closer. She noticed the emptiness of the car, as well as the damaged front end. Her father was somewhere nearby. Brandon said to carefully inspect the car for any note. He himself could not have gone far in such a short time. The girl was already finishing the examination when her head felt like lead, and her vision was constantly darkening. The professor who entered the laboratory noticed the unconscious girl lying there. The scientist carried Vanessa to the infirmary. He contacted the team and conveyed to them the girl's pitiful condition. She was lying unconscious on a bed. The professor came to the conclusion that fear and fatigue had ruined the baby's health. She needed rest and had overworked herself. The situation was made worse by the development of leukemia, for which they had no cure, and during the apocalypse it was impossible to obtain one. But they couldn't leave her. The scientists suggested Brandon look for a cure in the hospital. The institution in the past had a wealth of medicines. During the conversation, Patrick came running to the swordsman, reporting that there was no information about Vanessa's father's car and they had to choose a new route. Patrick was surprised by the pickup truck's load of resources. The girl's father ran away in a hurry, leaving all his things behind. But there was something else that seemed strange to the fat man. The car was filled to the brim with some strange black boxes, the size of cigarette boxes, but completely black and without any distinguishing marks or logos. Brandon assumed that these were boxes from an unknown medicine. They decided to take them with them and show them to the professor, but what to do with Vanessa's father? Brandon ordered them to go to the hospital. Vanessa's life and health were the priority now, and they could continue the search after finding a cure. The professor warned them that he needed to continue his experiments with black metal, and he couldn't use the drone to cover them. They were alone. Now, Patrick understood Brandon's obvious reluctance to have the girl with him. He knew about her leukemia and cared about her health and safety. But the disease was in an advanced stage. Even if they found a cure, the chance of Vanessa's recovery was low. But Brandon rudely shut the fat man up and ordered him to move on. Brandon was consumed by thoughts that in about 2 years, all the supplies in the city would run out, and the city would finally belong to the dead. A slight sadness fell on the soul of the young man. Maybe he won't succeed, and everything he does to save the world is in vain. With such thoughts, he continued his move. The fire spawn's arm was restored. The monster couldn't believe his eyes. The ampule of the unknown in the hat worked. His energy returned. The fiend felt an unprecedented power. His body was once again engulfed in tongues of flame. Letting out a contented roar, he heard the speech of the hat, accompanied by the white user. Hat was pleasantly surprised that the monster was a bearer of fire, a rare gift for monsters and useful for him. A syringe with the remains of the regenerative fluid was in his hand. Fire was incredibly happy to feel a surge of strength again. He was grateful to the hat for the service rendered. Now it was worth finding out what organization the unknown person belonged to. With his arms outstretched, Hat said that he was a representative of an organization that was gathering black metal users to create a paradise on Earth. The idea of creating a paradise on Earth was incredible and seemed impossible to Fire. He wondered if the Hat himself was the bearer of power. "Of course," said Hat. "There were a huge number of users like him. You just had to look." Although the man's strange appearance was unusual for a user. In response to the anomaly man's question, the man responded positively, saying that all this was for the sake of their happy new world, where there would be no worries or sorrows. Meanwhile, at the entrance to the clinic, the fat man saw the signs: private property, danger, do not enter, and exclaimed, "Could it really be that the hospital was occupied by people?" Brandon explained to him that such signs were a common occurrence for strategically important objects. They would simply take what they needed and leave. When the boys entered the building, they found no one there. Everything was quiet, which caused tension to fill the air. The walls were covered in threatening graffiti, and Patrick grew increasingly nervous, holding his sword at the ready. Brandon suggested that the guys split up. He would go look for equipment, and the other would look for medicine, and warned that if something happened, the guy would contact him. The fat man moved slowly down the corridor and looked dissatisfied, because the hospital was his second most hated place in life, and the smell of peroxide alone made the guy tremble. Suddenly, the guy smelled a sharp, fruity odor. He sniffed it more and more. The smell turned out to be very sweet and attracted him more and more. In the end, the fat man collapsed unconscious on the floor. Meanwhile, Brandon lost contact with the guy and thought he was messing around again. Suddenly, the guy caught the same scent as Patrick, but the main character was well aware of this aroma. Reacting instantly, the guy put a mask similar to a gas mask on his face. He fired a stream of energy at the ceiling, revealing purple smoke floating in the air. Afterwards, the guy announced the alarm to Fat Patrick that they were trapped and were leaving immediately. As he moved, Brandon noticed a girl in a medical uniform out of the corner of his eye, and at that very second he launched the claws of his protective fur at her. As if nothing had happened, she touched the claw with absolute calm and was inspired by the fur. In an instant, the girl jumped up, shining with joy, and said that she would be very grateful if the guy introduced her to the creator of this fur. She was aware that the fur was made from pearls extracted from the brains of zombies. Brandon asked her who she was, because the girl didn't look like an anomaly because of her smell. The girl introduced herself as Amelia, a sweet and brilliant doctor of medical sciences. The guy asked the girl whether she had released poisonous gas into the hospital and whether she had eaten pearls. It was she who actually released the poisonous gas, since it effectively repels zombies and stupefies intruders. And as for the pearls, Amelia didn't even know that they could be eaten. The main character did not reveal any details and asked if there was only one girl there. She began to behave strangely, and in response told that in this abandoned castle, there was only one princess left. after which she sarcastically asked if the guy intended to kidnap her from there, like some kind of villain. Brandon was starting to lose patience with her strange jokes, asking if she was afraid of death, to which she replied in a blissful voice that death was as tempting to her as sweets in a pastry shop, and she would not mind dying from what she loved. The guy thought she was crazy and asked what the girl specializes in, being a doctor of medical sciences. It turned out that she specializes in viral diseases and everything related to them. Hearing this, Brandon bombarded the girl with questions about the use of pearls. She just moved away and covered her ears with her hands, not wanting to discuss all the details. Turning around, she pointed her finger at him and scolded him for asking her endless questions, and reminded him that he still hadn't answered whether he could introduce her to the fur's creator. He told the girl about their research center and said that if she wanted, he could take her there, to which the girl was delighted. She also had a request that the guy had to agree to. Next, a flashback is shown, with Fat Patrick sitting in a car and calling his friend A-kun on the phone. Their partner Marie sits cheekily on the hood of a luxury car and talks about how much she enjoys setting others up. A-kun reports that Lao said that this is their last case, and as soon as they finish, they will finally return home and have a wedding with Marie. All three spotted the object they needed on the horizon and prepared to carry out the mission. They agreed that as soon as the target reached the desired location, Lao would give them a signal, after which they would begin to act. Marie began to act before the signal began, and Patrick nervously tried to contact the girl. It turned out that the girl's convertible crashed into a large truck at full speed, and Kun was racing ahead of the truck on his motorcycle, and immediately told the fat man that everything had not gone according to plan, and that he should leave quickly. Still sitting in the car, Patrick saw a combat vehicle flying behind him and panicked. They had been found out. In the present, Fat Patrick woke up and saw his friend and girl standing in front of him. The protagonist jokingly asked the guy if he had slept enough, and then ordered him to get up and get to work. Amelia explained to the fat man that he had been poisoned by a gas she had specially developed, and if he wasn't given antibodies in the next 3 hours, he would turn into a puddle of pus. Patrick was perplexed and panicked. Brandon asked the guy to stop yelling and help him carry the cans to the car. The girl immediately joined his request, telling the fat man that these samples were very important to her. Patrick only chatted about why everyone liked to force him to do everything he didn't want. Amelia immediately came close to him and said through gritted teeth that if he broke even one, she would personally shove the fat man into them. The guys quickly began to drag samples of human organs into the car. While moving the cans, Brandon wondered who the girl really was, returning to the thought of the poison gas. On that day of judgment, poison gas was often used by the leaders of various gangs. This is how they defended themselves from zombies and attacked their enemies. The poisonous gas honey cloud puts a person into a state of calm, and at the same time causes him fear. The guy couldn't believe that this girl really was the gas developer, and if she is also a brilliant mechanic like Dr. Henry, then he should keep a close eye on her and not allow her to fall into the hands of the Twilight Dragons gang. Finally, the guys finished with the samples, and the fat man breathed a sigh of relief. The doctor examined their combat vehicle and was amazed by its appearance. Observing the girl's behavior, Patrick only asked Brandon whether it was a good idea to take her with him. The guy explained to the fat man that with the doctor, they would have a better chance of curing Vanessa. Suddenly, on the roof of a neighboring building, the company discovered a huge anomaly beast, ready to attack. The monster attacked, and the fat man panicked and asked questions about who he was. Brandon took control of the situation and ordered the others to get into the car quickly. In an instant, he sent a stream of protective energy at the anomaly. However, the beast managed to escape his attack and rushed straight towards the guy. In the car, Patrick tried to reassure the doctor that they would be able to leave quickly, but the guy himself was shaking with fear. Having connected the signal with Brandon, he asked what was happening outside and if the guy was okay. Already in the fight with the anomaly, Brandon made a decision and shouted to the fat man to take the doctor away, and he would deal with the beast himself. Instantly, he struck the beast's face with his metal fist and launched an energy attack at it. In the car, Patrick kept trying to find out what kind of monster it was. In the back seat, the girl suddenly told me that this huge dog had been wandering around the hospital for the past few days, which is why no one could go outside. And then a verbal fight broke out. The fat guy was outraged that Amelia knew about the monster and didn't tell them anything. The girl explained this by saying that since the guys got into the hospital building, that means they knew about the monster. And if the guys have such advanced equipment, the monster won't be a problem for them. Afterwards, the girl asked if the guys were members of the Doomsday team, to which Patrick replied that now was not the time for jokes. The doctor replied that she was not joking and that she had thoroughly studied the zombie virus that had spread throughout the world. And given that they are still alive, they can already be considered the chosen ones. Meanwhile, Brandon continued to fight the beast. He mentally realized that such a beast should not be there at this time. A super beast, not at all like a domestic or wild animal, mutated as a result of infection with a zombie virus. He was bred using advanced genetic engineering and fused with a zombie virus, a product of a time before this. Brandon seemed to realize what was going on. The guy directed a beam attack at the monster, which it sharply reflected, thus confirming Brandon's suspicions. The beast pounced on him, attacking with sharp claws, but the boy jumped back in time. Once behind the monster, Brandon grabbed it by the appendage on its neck and smirked. The bitch should have been more accommodating. Having torn off his energy appendage, the guy armed himself with electric current. Now the beast was unable to repel the blows, and Brandon prepared for his fatal attack. Using his fur to propel himself forward, he dealt the brute a crushing blow and slammed him face first into the asphalt. Next, he finished him off with a straight blow, and blood flew everywhere. Having opened his brain, the boy took out a huge green pearl. Such a pearl was called the heart of the super beast, transformed black gold implanted into the animal. With props like these in hand, Brandon's subsequent work will go much faster. Meanwhile, on the roof of a neighboring building, a man who had been watching their entire fight, thoughtfully, said that the guy would become a serious hindrance. After moving to a cleaner area, Brandon tried to contact Fat Patrick, but it seemed they had moved far enough away that the signal was not getting through. The guy decided to return to base alone and took off. Once Brandon was high enough, he noticed a man standing on the roof, the one who was watching everything that was happening. He greeted the guy positively and tried to talk to him, but Brandon immediately directed a beam attack at him. In response, the man teleported to a nearby roof and shouted at the guy not to be so impulsive. He was not going to harm him. Without listening to the end, the guy attacked him with radiant energy. The man teleported again, this time right onto the handle of the mech, and said that he was just there to give the guy a message, and it wouldn't take him long. Brandon was annoyed and grabbed the fur in both paws, placing it at the level of his face, and wished to continue the dialogue in this format. The man introduced himself as Sun Bin from the Dark Organization, and said that, by order of their technical consultant, the boy had been invited to visit them, after which he gave the location. He also admitted that he had originally planned to invite Dr. Amelia, but now all that was left was... The man didn't have time to finish speaking. Brandon crushed him with his metal hands. There was blood on them, but no body was found. The man turned out to be an anomaly with the ability to replace himself with a bloody corpse. The guy was lost in his thoughts. Could it be that the Dark Organization had already formed? 50 years later, the Dark Organization became the most powerful organization in the world. They possessed colossal reserves of resources and gathered various kinds of elite representatives. Surely that techno-beast was created by them, and they must have been keeping a close eye on Brandon and his team for a long time. The virus has just broken out, and the Dark Organization has already been formed. There can only be one reason. This is the reason that someone from this organization also returned from the future. The pink-haired girl is surprised by the simplicity of the science center and doubts that this is where the mech and the machine were created. The bald guy is surprised that Brandon didn't tell the girl anything, but she went with them anyway, and the girl responds by claiming that she's a good judge of character. She thanks him for his help with the banks. The guy replies that he will do whatever is necessary for Vanessa. An old man comes out of the building towards them, surprised that they actually found a doctor. The girl greets him and asks if he is the same doctor who created the mech and this fighting machine. She introduces herself as Amelia. She is also a doctor and is here to meet him. The old man introduces himself in response as Henry. Amelia claims that despite the man's casual attire, he couldn't hide his mad scientist temperament, which makes Henry uncomfortable. He mentions that he heard about her, the youngest and most talented specialist in the field of virology, who also published in scientific journals. Tan is very embarrassed and flattered that a man knows so much about her and her success in science. But the girl immediately suggests postponing the casual conversation for later and getting down to business. She explains that she wants to work with him to study black pearls. She assumes that since he created such fur from these pearls, he must have a perfect understanding of what it is. Henry calls the pearl black gold, which surprises the girl. She asks if he came up with this name. Grandpa is wondering what to do, because he is not the doctor she is talking about. One way or another, Brandon does not want to tell all the secrets about the black gold, so it will be better to study it with Amelia. He says out loud that he would be glad to see research into black gold, and that he has made many discoveries recently. only at first he rather shyly asks her to help with something. Vanessa lies unconscious in a hospital bed, connected to several medical devices. Amelia monitors her condition and writes notes in her notebook. Henry asks with concern what's wrong with the girl. The girl rereads her notes and thinks. She asks what the girl's relationship is to the man, and he replies that they are not related, but he treats her like a granddaughter. Amelia says she can only say one thing and raises her hand in an OK sign. Grandfather assumes that everything is fine based on the meaning of this gesture. But the girl didn't mean that. The man was afraid that she only had 3 years left. Amelia reveals that she only has 3 months left, which horrifies Henry. She has encountered this disease countless times. She doesn't know how Vanessa is still alive. Her current state of health is no longer able to withstand higher doses of chemotherapy. And due to the influence of abnormal viruses, conventional methods are unable to eliminate the tumor. The man frantically tries to figure out what to do next. The girl's life is very dear to him. Holding the ball in her hands, Amelia suggests using it, since there are no other options. At this time, Vanessa comes to her senses and hears Amelia's conversation with Henry. Their discussion that she should eat the pearl. The girl suggests feeding it to her, because the balls are digestible. She intends to use this black gold to create a new drug that will replace chemotherapy. She has already tried it. Under special conditions, this black gold is activated, emitting unusual energy, and thereby promoting the restoration of damaged cells, and also creating a new shell around them. Henry mentions here the anomalies who became like that after eating black gold, and he won't let that happen to Vanessa. Amelia asks what kind of idiot would eat these black pearls. He says that he saw several of them. After eating the black gold, they received powerful superpowers. The girl says that this is something new and asks to tell her about it in more detail. Consuming such an energetic substance without conducting research can cause extremely unstable consequences. In that case, this is exactly what they need to study. She will be able to quickly finish preparing the medicine, and then she will need his help. He asks her to be careful. He doesn't want to see Vanessa turn into a monster, but there is no time left. They have no other choice. The stocky guy finally moved all of Amelia's cans, and sighing wiped the sweat from his face. He wonders what's so valuable about these dismembered zombies. The girl doctor thanks him for his help. He carefully asks if the girl's disease is curable. She replies that the chances are quite high. While she's okay, the guy decides to go and check on Brandon. Amelia also mentions that Dr. Henry spoke about searching for the girl's father. She asks that he be returned safe and sound if possible, as this will greatly help her recovery. Brandon in the exosuit is completely fried in the sun. The thick metal suit makes it even worse. Much time had passed, and his friend Patrick still had not returned for him. While searching for water, Brandon stumbles upon a shopping mall and flies towards it. Inside, he discovers a pool and is surprised by this, although he was thirsty. Out of the corner of his ear, he catches a sound. Someone or something rushes past him. He immediately attacks the source of movement with a discharge of energy from the suit's hand. A huge reptile flies up to him and, opening its mouth, bites the guy's suit. He tries to stop the bite with his hands. Reptile throws himself towards Brandon, disorienting him with a powerful blow. Swinging and preparing the discharge, the protagonist jumped on the monster, ready to attack. After a brief hand-to-hand combat, Brandon directs a green energy beam into the reptile's jaw. From the huge body of the reptile, a female mutated body of a monster with red hair separates. The bald guy drives by and notices that the streets are too quiet. Brandon should have finished off that monster by now. Suddenly, Vanessa's voice comes from the speaker. She woke up and tried to contact the guy. She says she feels better and asks if the bald guy is still outside. He says that in her current state, she should get a good rest. Let her leave the search to them. The girl insists that she still cannot sleep and will continue the search. Patrick agrees, but asks not to force himself and entrusts her with aerial reconnaissance. Vanessa is surprised by something, and the guy asks if she found Brandon. But not quite. She sees a group of zombies around the construction site. The zombies there surrounded someone. They gathered in a tight circle around a blue metal container. A girl appears on the roof of a container building, frightened and covered with a dirty blanket. The bald guy recognizes her as a girl from Lowe's gang. After their victory over them, she disappeared somewhere. He drives the car there. They decide to save the girl from a crowd of zombies. Patrick drives at high speed through the crowd around the container, getting closer to it. Vanessa tells the girl from the drone that they will now disperse the monsters, and she should wait for the right moment and jump into the car. The girl jumps from the container into the car at the right moment. She recognizes the bald guy. He proudly introduces their team as the Invincible Doomsday Team. At this time, Brandon is thrown aside by the reptile's blow, falling in a dirty suit. The bright glow of the green pearls in the reptile's eyes burns out his retina. and he tries to shield himself from the light with his hand. His protective mask was damaged in the previous battle and cannot be used. The guy fires a blast of energy from the suit's hand, but the reptile dodges. With her tail, she grabs the exoskeleton's leg, lifting it into the air above the pool. Brandon falls and sinks into the water in his heavy suit and sinks due to the considerable weight. With its bright gaze, the reptile deprives the guy of the ability to move. Her tail is already heading towards the guy's head, and he is preparing for a sudden death. But then 2 beams of green charge pierce the wall, striking the reptile. Baldy loudly asks how Brandon is and announces that the Doomsday team is already here. Taking advantage of the reptile's distraction, Brandon grabs it by the tail with the suit's hand. He tells her that they are not finished yet. She should not think about running away. The protagonist orders Patrick to shoot lasers at the reptile if the creature stares at him. Upon hearing a positive answer, Brandon fires energy bolts from both hands at the monster. The reptile falls to the floor exhausted from the blow, but tries to get up. Grabbing her head, the guy asks how the hybrid anomaly ended up here. He asks her, pinning her to the ground, if the Dark Organization sent him to kill him. In response to her silence, Brandon tells her to speak, and if she can't, to slap herself as a positive response. Hearing the name of the Dark Organization, the reptile becomes hysterical and screams that he will not return there. From the car, a bald guy wonders how the big dog he fought turned into a reptile. Seeing the girl in the car's cabin, the reptile seems to recognize her and reaches out to her, calling her Lena. Her screams irritate Brandon, and he threatens to strangle her if she continues to make noise. Getting out of the car, Lena recognizes the reptile as her sister, Annie. Patrick is surprised that this monster is her sister. Apparently, she also ate the black gold and became an anomaly. Lena asks what happened to her, and she tells her that the Organization of Darkness and their experiments were very painful. Brandon irritably asks if they've talked enough, because he's ready to end her suffering. Lena asks not to do this. She is her sister, although she doesn't know who made a monster out of her. Vanessa intervenes, saying that they are sisters and have just reunited, and that she cannot be killed. Brandon tells her not to be so naive. She is fused with the super beast. Her mind is no longer in a normal state. The girl tearfully asks him to let her conquer them. Let them at least try. Brandon was full of anger and said that this creature almost finished him off, so he would not feel sorry for her. The fat man objected to him, because it was Vanessa who noticed how her brother was dragged under the water by the monster, and if she hadn't told him to come here, he didn't think the guy would be standing here. Annie the anomaly saw a girl's hand timidly touching hers. She was very excited. She stood up and stammered, asking if they were representatives of the Dark Organization, but Lena replied that they were looking for survivors in the city. Annie admitted that she had escaped, and that the Dark Organization had brought a large dog here to track her down. Lena asked her if she attacked her brother because she mistook him for one of the Dark Organization, and just wanted to protect herself, and Annie replied that she was just scared. She said she didn't want to hurt anyone, as long as Lena was okay, and she affectionately called Annie little sister. A voice came from the depths of the room, saying that the research institute was spacious, and there weren't many people there, and that the doctors were working on zombies, and might be able to help Lena's sister. It was a fat man who, however, noticed that Annie didn't seem to fit into the car. Annie leaned over to her sister and told her that wherever she went, she would follow her, and Lena said her name with tears in her eyes. The fat man yelled at his sister Vanessa if she really wanted to invite this monster woman to their place, and Brandon remarked that they would feel safer together. The fat man got behind the wheel of the car and offered to go, since the main character had already given his silent consent. In the bushes growing along the road along which the car was moving, the figure of a monster appeared, its red mane fluttering in the wind. The fat man, gripping the steering wheel tightly with both hands, admired its speed. And then the doctor and his research assistant, Dr. Amelia, looked up in amazement at this blue monster with a red mane. They asked Brandon how this had happened, and he stood by the car with a gloomy look, clenched his teeth, and said nothing. Lena said that her real name was Jolena. She and her sister lived in the western region, and when the disaster happened, they moved to the south. And now they were together again, the sisters standing next to each other, feeling how close they were to each other, despite how different they were now. Dr. Amelia was curious to get a closer look at Annie, and took a few steps towards her. And suddenly, in just a few seconds, she dived underground. Only a blue tail with red veins flashed. The woman was surprised. She couldn't understand whether Annie was afraid of strangers, or whether this was a manifestation of sociopathy. At this time, the fat man standing behind the car asked Lena how she ended up at the construction site, since there was no water or food there. And besides, she was there alone. Lena admitted that at first there was a man with her who took her with him, and together with him she hid from the zombies. But then he needed to leave, and he told her to wait for him at the construction site. She told the fat man that she never waited for her companion, and the fat man wondered who could lead her through a city full of zombies. Lena said that the man gave her a cloak sticky with zombie flesh and blood so that she could hide her scent. The zombies would not smell it, and the fat man was surprised that it seemed to be the same man. Here, Vanessa screamed and asked about Lena's companion, whether he was a tall man with short hair, and whether his name was Alex by any chance. Lena replied that it seemed so, and the girl's eyes filled with tears because Alex was her dad. The girl fell to the floor and burst into tears, and Grandpa Henry and his employee rushed to her to console her. Dr. Henry asked if Vanessa was okay, and Dr. Amelia, calling her a pumpkin, complained that she had left the room without permission. The fat man, sitting in the car, suggested to his brother that they go again and look for the girl's father. But Brandon objected, saying that night would soon fall and it would become even more dangerous outside, that the mech needed repairs, and that the defensive structures around the scientific institute needed to be strengthened. Dr. Henry, clenching his fists, walked towards the schoolboy and demanded that everything be explained properly, since he seemed to know everything. He said angrily that he didn't know why Brandon was protecting these secrets or what he was fighting against. And although he didn't interfere in the student's personal affairs, he felt uneasy. The fat man agreed with him and noted that if something happened to the guy and they couldn't help, then it would all be over. The student thought for a moment and decided it was time to talk to everyone. He gathered everyone in the room and said that he was the one who returned to the past after 50 years. The fat man asked in amazement if this was time travel, and remarked that he had always believed that Brandon was not an ordinary person. Dr. Henry was also surprised that it would be possible to return to the past in the future, and asked whether the physical body or consciousness would move. And to Dr. Amelia it seemed incredible that after 50 years the human race would still exist. Brandon took out the ball and, holding it in his hand, said that the source of everything is still black gold. He also noted that this is the cause of the disaster, as well as the basis of scientific and technological progress. They researched black gold to understand how to fight the zombie virus, and their latest achievement was a time machine that moved consciousness through space and time within the radiation of black gold energy. But unfortunately, although they had the ability to return to the past, they were unable to prevent the emergence of the zombie virus. They could only transfer consciousness to the earliest period of the virus outbreak. Brandon asked the doctor if he had examined the composition of the black gold, as it was not similar to terrestrial chemical elements. And due to the loss of data, one could only assume that this thing most likely came to them from space. The fat man was even more amazed and asked if this was really an alien invasion. Lena noted that if that were the case, then the aliens should have already enslaved them. And the guy said that the virus had been wiping humanity off the face of the earth for several years. And after 50 years, there were very few people left in the world. Tens or several million, or maybe less. But even despite this, people still did not stop fighting and killing each other over resources. And in the organization he belonged to, all his predecessors were older than him, but they were all killed. Therefore, the main character was ultimately left alone, and he had to complete the organization's final task: return to the past and rebuild it again. The fat man said that now he understood why the student was so furiously hunting for black gold, and asked if Brandon was really over 50 years old. The schoolboy chuckled and replied that he was probably over 70, and the fat man felt like he had suddenly aged dramatically, while the student said that his consciousness had returned to the moment when he first saw a zombie at school. With enemy soldiers standing at their walls, there was no time to make precise calculations, and when his partner teleported him, he had to blow up the laboratory, burying the time machine under its remains. The protagonist sadly said that he didn't know how they verified the results of the experiment. The fat man exclaimed that it was the first time he had heard a student talk so much, and the doctor's assistant concluded that since he was talking about his life, it meant they were his future partners. Brandon said grimly that he wasn't sure, but he really hoped that would be the case. He said that changes had already occurred, and asked Dr. Amelia if she had studied the properties of the zombie virus, and whether she had managed to find out anything. She raised her finger importantly and noted that it was a miracle that they had survived at all, because the zombie virus was not only contracted by a zombie bite. Amelia shuddered and almost whispered that in fact this virus is transmitted by airborne droplets. Everyone jumped up from their seats in amazement and screamed, and the doctor asked how they had managed to stay alive. She replied that they were chosen by heaven, and that the antibodies in their bodies prevented the spread of the virus, and that this was amazing. But she also noted that this does not guarantee that they will not undergo changes after being bitten by a zombie. Brandon grimly confirmed that this was indeed the case, and that their bodies were already infected with the zombie virus. And even if they weren't bitten, sooner or later they could turn into zombies. And although they were immune to the virus, that didn't mean they had nothing to fear. The fat man said that he understood why the student had not shared anything with them. And Yebe replied that he had previously doubted whether it was worth talking about. But what happened today confirmed his suspicions, and he noticed that someone had accelerated the spread and mutation of the zombie virus. And that was the Dark Organization. At this time and in another place, a boy with the remains of terrible horns sticking out of his head joyfully said that he had become a man again. The fair-haired man wearing dark glasses and a top hat chuckled and told him that he was now officially a member of the Dark Organization. The guy happily responded that he was very glad about this and thanked the man for his help. Brandon, continuing to recall, said that basically everyone was infected from a zombie bite, but the time it took to absorb sunlight for the first wave of mutations increased to a couple of days, and the likelihood that ordinary people would turn into anomalies increased. And if we take into account today's super beast and those fused anomalies, there is no doubt that the Dark Organization worked on them. Fatso and Amelia listened anxiously to the guy's words, because he was sure that the Dark Organization had also sent its people from the future. Maybe they had managed to restore the destroyed time machine. Patrick asked that since the Dark Organization had a time machine and a way to control the zombie virus, why didn't they go back in time to save humanity? Brandon replied that the Dark Organization would do anything but save humanity, and that they recognized anomalies as a superior being compared to humans. They intend to create a world in which the anomalies will dominate, and in other words, their goal is to destroy humanity. And then Dr. Henry thoughtfully tugged at his gray beard and said that perhaps something could be done. He said that he had taken some of the medicines from the black boxes that Patrick had brought and had found that their composition was similar to that of black gold, and that there was quite a lot of this gold in the solution of the medicine. Henry suggested that it was like some kind of catalyst, and Dr. Amelia listened to him with excitement. The grandfather asked the schoolboy if it was possible that the Dark Organization was secretly distributing such drugs to everyone, and he sullenly confirmed it, saying that they could have added it to tap water and drinks. The fat man suddenly stopped him, saying that he remembered that they found these drugs in Vanessa's dad's car, because he couldn't be among them. Brandon replied that this needed to be checked, and that as long as the Dark Organization continued to exist, humanity would last at most 5 years, or maybe even less. He asked Henry to discuss with him the location of the Institute's defensive structures, where the poisonous gas developed by Dr. Amelia should be installed, and she would do everything possible to cure Vanessa. She easily agreed and asked the protagonist if this girl was his sister. But Brandon snapped that there was no time for idle chatter, and that the Institute needed to be strengthened immediately. At this time, Vanessa woke up in a hospital room and sat up in bed. She was still connected to the ventilator. She glanced at Lena, saw that she was sleeping, quietly removed the device from her face, put on her slippers, and carefully left the room. The girl wandered through the empty corridors in the hope of seeing at least someone, but there was no one. In the lab, Amelia sat at her workstation and muttered that the boy didn't seem like a dreamer, and that perhaps her guesses were correct. She hoped that coming here would help solve some of the problems, but she wasn't sure, because so far they had only increased. And then she saw Vanessa, who, with a pale and unhappy look, quietly entered her laboratory, scolded the girl for leaving again without permission, and told her to come back. Of course, Amelia understood that the girl missed her dad, but she couldn't neglect her health because of this. And Dr. Henry, like the others, was already resting, so Vanessa could meet with them tomorrow. The girl timidly asked who Dr. Amelia had just spoken to. She was afraid that the zombies were already here. The girl laughed and pointed to the large tank with the zombie's head standing in front of her. She said that she had been in love with this guy since childhood, and that he was a real jerk. He was such a meek, good-natured, timid guy, but he often overestimated his strength. It was obvious that he did not like working as a doctor, but he still tried very hard to pass the exams. He was repeatedly rejected, but he stubbornly continued. Amelia gently stroked the tank with the zombie's head and said that, despite everything, only he remained on her side. The old farts who sit in hospitals and profit from the results of other people's work wanted to steal her research results, but only he dared to speak out in her defense and clear her name. Even when a disaster happened and zombies attacked them, the young man protected her from these monsters until the very end. While testing the poison gas, he allowed himself to be surrounded by zombies so Amelia could escape, and when he became infected, he tried to fight the zombies, but they tore him apart. And when she looked at the mutilated corpses that lay there everywhere, she no longer knew where exactly his remains were. The woman kept wondering if it would be possible to bring this guy back to life, if all the parts of his body were connected. However, she then laughed nervously and hastened to reassure Vanessa that everything she said was a joke, and that resurrecting zombies were not funny at all. The woman apologized to the girl for making her remember all this, and she suddenly turned to her. Vanessa timidly, stumbling over every word, suggested that maybe Amelia really liked this guy. She agreed that it was impossible not to fall in love with such a handsome man, and then sent the girl back to bed, because the woman needed to stay here a little longer, and then dive in to find Miss Annie. When the girl approached the water, a shadow was visible in it, and then a strange creature appeared from there. It looks at Vanessa kindly, turns to her, says that it wants to hide so that they don't find it. Vanessa says that the dark organization treated her badly, and her body became so uncomfortable. The creature replies that it doesn't want to remember. It was scary, but now it doesn't hurt. Miss Annie says that little sister Vanessa will be in pain, asks if it hurts now. Vanessa gives a positive answer, saying that she thought she could get used to it if she was patient. Whatever they become, the only thing that matters is that they are still human. After speaking, her body began to weaken and she lost consciousness, falling onto the creature's tail. The creature wrapped its tail around the baby, making it seem like a crib, and she continued to lie there unconscious. The girl became worried and ran to the baby. She told her to lie in the room, but she went outside. She says that if Vanessa continues like this, she will never be cured. Barely conscious, the girl asks Dr. Tan in a weak voice to finish the operation quickly. The man is looking for Miss Marie. He doesn't know where she went and whether zombies attacked her. But as a rule, if there is no bleeding, then the zombies will not feel you, which means they should not have attacked her. He looks at the asphalt and sees huge tire tracks. He doesn't understand who is here. A whistle is heard high in the sky as a man hides from a dragon-like creature. He had already relaxed, thinking that he had escaped, but suddenly the bearded man appeared, shouting that he had found him. Vanessa lies in a green glass box with a breathing tube, and a doctor stands next to her. Dr. Henry is worried about whether black gold will really help cure Vanessa. Brandon says the baby needs to get used to the energy of black gold, and is currently in remission. He combined a part of the super beast's heart with red and black gold. The doctor will perform the operation using the formula he provided her. As long as the chain reaction does not exceed the sensitivity threshold, she is in no danger. Grandpa asks if such experiments were conducted in the future and whether he, too, took part in the creation of the anomalies. This method is merely a side effect in the creation of anomalies, and some call it the elixir of immortality. It is somewhat effective in curing diseases, but Brandon does not know if it grants immortality. Brandon says that if this method doesn't work, they will have no other choice. Patrick, while driving, tells Miss Lena that there are too many regular zombies here. They are already close to the construction site where they met her. She apologizes because she doesn't know much about flying a drone or using a computer. It's a bit difficult when you have to view so much on the surveillance screen at the same time. Patrick says that Vanessa's dad is not an ordinary person, which means he should notice them. The girl says that she has already found him with the help of a drone. He is running on the other side. Vanessa's dad isn't just running, he's running away from a group of zombie-like monsters. He throws off his cloak, which flies into the crowd of monsters, but fire cans fly after it. Everything explodes and starts to burn. The monsters are drowned in flames, but there is no effect on them. A green laser erupts from Patrick's tank, hitting two monsters at once. Patrick makes a sharp turn, and driving up to Vanessa's father, asks if it is him. Patrick shouts that there is no time to explain, and that the man should quickly get into the car. The man gets in, asking to be taken to Vanessa, and Patrick hits the gas, taking off. Two men in suits are watching this, one asking if Vanessa's father can be let go so easily. But all of them are goals that are under the advisor's special attention and should be taken seriously. Another thinks that it would be better to finish them off right away. Engaging in petty mischief is not their style, but it's not his style to say such things. He himself understands perfectly well that they don't have enough hands. Recently, a girl mutated into a superior anomaly. She took control of 1,000 zombies to attack them, but she was still defeated, and she could not be saved. A supreme anomaly master capable of controlling 1,000 zombies is a huge loss. This is true because for them, even one zombie is considered a huge loss. Vanessa's father is confused. He hasn't seen old Henry for a long time, and he is very happy to see them. The man apologizes because he made the guys worry, and he is very sorry that it happened. But there was no need to waste time on empty chatter. He needed to wash, disinfect himself, and see Vanessa. The old man says her condition worsened, and she was constantly searching for survivors and her father. The man begins to blame himself, saying that he is an idiot and that he should have returned earlier. Grandpa Henry says he's sorry because the man had it tough too, but he has a lot to talk about. He is holding an unknown object in his hands. It was found in his car, but he himself does not know what it is. The dark organization gave it to him. He thought they were helping distribute drugs. They agreed to help him cure Vanessa. He didn't think it would work out that way. Old man Henry asks if he has joined them and if he knows how the medicine works. He only knows that the spread of zombies in the city is connected to this medicine, which is why he wanted to leave the organization. He pretended to continue delivering the goods and wanted to escape with Vanessa, but the road was blocked by zombies, so he had to call her and tell her to close all the windows and doors. But she disobeyed and went to do good and continue looking for her father. The man thinks that this is his punishment because he always told his daughter to do good deeds. But he himself spread evil. He cries, calling himself a terrible father. But they ask him to stop because Vanessa is still alive. Dr. Amelia came to take some blood from the man, and it would be better if he was her biological father. Their blood types don't match Vanessa's, otherwise they would have cured her. Her father is the only hope. The father agrees. He asks to take as much blood from him as is needed, just to save Vanessa. Amelia says that such self-sacrifice is good, because otherwise she would have to use black gold. He started shouting that she should not dare to do this, and under no circumstances should she use black gold. He doesn't know how to explain it, but the dark organization will use the black gold for some kind of experiment. It will cover the entire city of Anshi, and will result in the death of many people. But hasn't everyone in this area turned into a zombie and there are no immortals either? In general, black gold cannot be used, because they said that it would affect everything that was connected to it. Unfortunately, there is no other way out, because they can only fight this with the help of black gold. Vanessa's father shouts that they need to run quickly, and that they can't stay here any longer. He doesn't pay attention to the fact that Vanessa can't leave the hospital room. He wants to take her and run away. Suddenly, Brandon knocks him out with a wrench, saying he's too noisy. He asks to quickly take blood from his father and perform the operation, because now there is no time to waste. A guy with long hair asks the bartender how he feels about the Organization of Darkness. Wiping the glass, he replies that all his comrades died, and he was left alone. The guy aiming the dart says he wanted to protect his only remaining comrade. The guy says they could have become comrades, but he thought there would be more of them. Of course, there are more of them, members of the organization all over the world. But now they are busy recruiting people. The blonde guy is very interested in what kind of society the anomalies will be able to form. They no longer feel the need for food, and can change their appearance at will. But it is unlikely that they can be easily united. Well said. This is exactly the problem the advisor is thinking about. Now they are listening to her. The guy asks if it's even possible to trust a person from the future, to which the other thinks yes. He remembers how the advisor mentioned him, saying that he would have a good life and would have merits. The question arises that Brandon also came back from the future. So why doesn't he want to be abnormal? This is because he is not very capable. He was always worse than others, so he used a time machine to improve his past. But the Brandon the guy knew before and this one were two completely different people. So it turns out that he is trying to settle scores with those who previously bullied him. The bearded man is in favor of eliminating Brandon's thorn and letting the anomalies rule the world. The world that Brandon is striving for is too different from the world of the Dark Organization, so they should get rid of it. But now there is still a chance to win him over to your side and introduce him to new ideas. They are made of black gold, and it is the whole meaning of their existence. They have abandoned their previous body and found a new life. They wish to study black gold in more detail in order to become the most powerful beings on Earth and in the entire universe. Patrick says Brandon mentioned his future partners, and he asks where they are now. They should be young now, and it would be awkward for Brandon if they met them and didn't recognize him. The present and the future have changed. He does not know whether they are alive now, and whether it is possible to meet them in their old places. Patrick wonders what to do now to restore his former team. His partners are not specific people, but those who believe in the same idea as he does, and Patrick is interested in which one. His idea is to destroy black gold and anomalies throughout the world and bring back humanity. It sounds unachievable, which is why the team is small. Because in the future, no one was able to completely abandon black gold, no matter how much harm it brought. Human cities regularly sent criminals and rebels to mine black gold. People, trying to survive, preferred to simply obey, and the number of dissenters dwindled. Brandon sank into a whirlpool of memories, his voice tinged with sadness. In the past, outcasts and the rabble of society were brought to zombie reservations to obtain black metal. But even then, people silently obeyed, and those who disagreed were exterminated. Patrick was amazed by Earth's past, although he found it strange that despite Brandon's desire to destroy the sources of the black metal, the youth himself was able to handle weapons made from it perfectly. Brandon was not confused by his friend's question. In order to effectively fight the enemy, they had to study it completely. They had to know the essence of the metal in order to effectively destroy it. While repairing the rhino, Brandon informed his friend that after their victory over the enemies, they would also be responsible for destroying all black metal weapons, including the one they had in their possession. Patrick was very inspired by the swordsman's words. He was glad that next to him was a man of such responsible and pure views. The youth never ceased to amaze the fat man. How little he knew Brandon. But the guy quickly cooled his friend's ardor. In fact, his convictions were not as strong as Patrick thought, unlike his friends, without whom Brandon would have long since lost his spirit and will. Vanessa's face was illuminated by laboratory lamps. The capsule's reservoir refracted the light, giving it a turquoise hue, and the oxygen mask with a tube on the girl's face also drove the girl into a slight coma. The professor was sitting opposite the bed, working on his tablet, when the man woke up. His previous wanderings had exhausted him mentally and physically, but the professor noted that the rain had stopped, which was good news. Panic overwhelmed the man's thoughts. The organization was about to begin its experiment on the world, and they had to hide. But the scientist was as calm as ice. He reasoned that if the experiment was of such a global scale, running was useless. However, Brandon's plan didn't include an escape clause. The young man had a plan. He wasn't going to just wait for another end of the world to happen with his hands folded, and he certainly wasn't going to run away. Vanessa, knowing the approaching storm, shared the swordsman's views. The girl's father noted that the girl's fearlessness was due to her childish naivety, as well as his own upbringing. Despite this, inside he was still proud of his daughter's will. But the scientist did not agree with him. During her entire stay with them, Vanessa had witnessed all sorts of horrors. She had gone through many trials after which her decisions could not be attributed to naivety. The girl had grown up, and with her, her views. The professor was sure that the little girl's will was much stronger than they all thought. She was not making a childish decision. The girl, knowing the risks, still asked the doctor for the operation, although the danger was high. The story and the meeting with the girl awakened ancient memories of the elder, and he once had a son. But the scientist was strict with him in his upbringing, sometimes even too much, which ended in conflict between them, and they grew apart. The wounds of his soul were still tormented by conscience and deep pain. He did not have enough time to restore peace in his relationship with his son. His child died before the moment when the elder was able to apologize. Although there was a chance that his son had returned, it was nevertheless small, or his son refused to visit his father one way or another. The professor no longer worried about it so much. He still had things to do. The past was not in the scientist's power. He decided to end this conversation with Vanessa's father. There was much to do before a new Armageddon began. It was cloudy and damp outside, although the moisture gave the fur a special hue. Brandon was checking the robot's main systems, and Patrick's passion at the sight of his fur once again overwhelmed the fat man. He loved the guy's things too much. The organization's representatives wanted to meet with them, and since he was going to meet the lion, he should be fully armed, ready for any scenario. The chance of a trap was huge. Brandon wouldn't be himself if he missed such a sweet opportunity to destroy the organization's lair, in which the mech would help him. Thinking about this, he pressed the button, activating the helmet and the main systems of the robot. But the young man could not leave the research center without protection, which he placed on the shoulders of his friend Patrick, warning him that he was the main protector in his absence. The fat man greeted his friend's order with enthusiasm and fighting spirit. A great responsibility had fallen on him. Brandon was counting on him, and he could not let him down. A lot was at stake today. The sound of the mech's accelerators was heard, and the nozzles emitted green flame, lifting the steel mechanism into the sky at an enormous speed. Patrick watched it go and wished it luck. Behind the mech's body, a trail of green light continued in the sky, clearly visible in the cloudy dark sky. Had admired the mech. They were ready. Brandon made the first move. Everything was going according to his plan. The target was heading straight into a hornet's nest, as it seemed to Brandon himself. Their naivety played into the organization's hands. If everything continued like this, their plan would be successful. A tall man with a blue beard and matching mohawk hair, wearing glasses, stepped forward. The next move would be theirs. Hat confirmed his subordinate's fighting spirit and remained to watch. In an instant, a great tremor ran through Iroquois's body. His body underwent a metamorphosis. His teeth lengthened and took the form of a boar's fangs. His skin turned blood red with patches of blue fur. A winged creature with a pig's fanged head was ready. The professor was sitting in the lab with a nurse. Vanessa's tests showed that the treatment could have a positive result. A stem cell transplant was necessary, and Sister's cells matched the girls, which pleased the scientist. The professor conveyed the results to Vanessa's father, and the good news touched his father's heart. In the past, even a lifetime would not have been enough to earn money for such an operation. The man was immensely grateful to the scientist and wanted to thank him in return, but the elder merely grinned and told father to carefully observe what was happening through the cameras in order to spot the enemy in time. The professor also thanked her father for teaching Vanessa computer skills. Her knowledge greatly helped the team during operations, and the girl made a significant contribution to the common cause. A sudden explosion rocked the research complex, leveling one of its sections with a monstrous blast, whose kinetic force reverberated throughout the entire structure. The shockwave was so powerful that it seemed to people as if the Earth's crust had cracked and plates had collided, marking the beginning of an earthquake. Vibrations and rumbles shook the entire structure. Iroquois bombarded the complex, generating balls of purple flame with his hands, sending out strikes one after another, reducing the research center to splinters while everything was going smoothly. The pink-haired sister tried to hold on to anything, but the floor was shaking and kinetic vibrations shook her body. She was overcome with fear. She prayed for this chaos to end soon. It was necessary to act quickly. The professor decided to check the situation. He asked the man what was going on and whether he could see on the cameras who attacked them. How could Brandon have left at the wrong time? The bristly man feverishly began to analyze the data from the cameras. Unfortunately, some of the cameras were damaged or completely destroyed by the explosion, while others did not show the enemy. Patrick leaped into the rhino with lightning speed. He alone separated those who were dear to him from death. The rhino roared and rushed to the epicenter of the explosions. In the sky he saw a winged creature, cutting the complex with flames. The complex was protected by a barrier, which the red monster was able to penetrate, and things could have gotten even worse. Red was preparing for a new attack by generating balls of fire around itself. Patrick's brain was working at full capacity. This had to be stopped. The fat man told the professor to open the gate to attack the monster, and also to supply electricity to the fence and turn on the gas. The professor carried out all the instructions with lightning speed, warning Patrick to be careful. There was no doubt that this was a representative of the organization, and he knew that this was only the beginning. Patrick readied the rhino's primary combat systems for battle. Although the enemy had caught them off guard, they were by no means defenseless. The fat man was steering the armored personnel carrier into a combat trajectory. A green beam of black energy shot out from the transport towards the red monster. Patrick wanted to inflict maximum damage and catch his opponent when he was not expecting the attack. The beam almost reached the creature's carcass, but it dodged. It was incredible how gracefully and flexibly the monster passed all of the rhinoceros's shots, performing pirouettes and loops in the sky, dodging the attacks. Brandon flew into the organization's territory, but he was haunted by a vague uneasiness. The abrupt loss of signal from the complex led Brandon to the thought that he was already on the organization's territory, and there was nothing to worry about. He hoped that his friends were okay. He made all sorts of preparations for the attack on the complex in order to protect his friends. The young man prayed for his friends and with determination picked up the pace. Before he could assess the terrain, a cannonade of fiery beams pierced the skies from the ground. Only reflexes helped the swordsman maneuver to the side, avoiding the destruction of the mech. On the ground, he saw groups of combat mechs sending volleys of their weapons at him. These robots were smaller and more imperfect than his mech, but they had their share in numbers. Their purple coloring was clearly visible against the gray background of the road on which they stood. This could only mean one thing. A mechanic from the organization from the future had returned to their time. Such an appearance did not bode well, as the mechs they had built posed a great threat. After returning fire from his guns, the shells collided with an obstacle. The swordsman was surprised to encounter barriers on these drones. This state of affairs was even more dangerous for him, but if the option with long-range attacks was impossible, then a close one remained a way out of the situation. Having picked up speed, the mech forcefully kicked one of the drones. Having destroyed one of this steel flock, His radar alerted him to approaching airborne targets. To his surprise, the drones were equipped not only with a barrier, but also with boosters. In an attempt to stop them, Brandon launched a whole series of missiles into the swarm. Such weapons could penetrate the shield and cause irreparable damage to the mechs. His work had a large arsenal of weapons. The sky was lit up with a series of fiery flashes like fireworks. Flying mechs exploded one after another. Missiles easily found their target and opened the barrier like a knife through a can. Of course, watching the rhinoceros and the Iroquois was an exciting experience, but the hat and long hair had their own role to play in this battle. By tying up Patrick and creating a breach, they had to penetrate the complex. But their task was complicated by the presence of a fence with hundreds of volts on its rings, and gas was sprayed around it. If they tried to pass, they would certainly die. But it seemed that the hat had a plan. Longhair caught himself thinking that he had plans within plans for everything. Asking the hat what they would do, he replied that he had an idea. Sitting behind the security cameras, Bristly asked the professor and the pink-haired nurse about the situation, his voice trembling under stress and adrenaline. Although Patrick was managing to cope with Red for now. A sudden flash of pain stabbed like needles into the man's neck. When he touched the painful spot, he felt a wet spot on his fingers. Bristly didn't understand how this could have happened. Before he could even analyze the situation, a bloody fountain of liquid gushed from his neck. The blood was leaving the girl's father's body so rapidly that he simply fell exhausted and convulsing onto the floor, unable to do anything. The last drops of blood flowed from the man's lifeless body, as the pool of blood in which Bristly lay began to transform into a humanoid silhouette. Hat entered the complex. Smiling at his triumph, Hat was pleased with the result. It had taken him a great deal of effort to cut the bloody mark on Vanessa's father's body without it being noticed. But everything had been done perfectly. Patrick kept chasing the monster like a kitten chasing its shadow. Red maneuvered so masterfully that not a single projectile had reached its target, which angered the fat man. In an attempt to inflict at least some damage on the beast, the rhinoceros fired a whole series of homing missiles. Patrick thought that at least this should have some effect. But this user differed from the others in his colossal strength and a whole palette of different abilities and skills. None of the missiles ever reached their target. Patrick could do nothing to counter the creature's flames. However, covered by the smoke from the detonated missiles, Patrick fired a salvo from the rhino's cannon. Red didn't have time to react and was knocked to the ground. The fiend's body crashed to the ground with a roar, but the descending clouds of dust revealed the creature to be whole and unharmed, the red one already generating a new wave of energy to strike the rhinoceros. Patrick didn't have time to move the rhinoceros out of the fire's path when a purple flash of light blinded everything around him. This time, Red's ball reached its target. The armored personnel carrier was hit. The horned head relaxed a little, the monster's mouth curved into a smile. Initially, Red was frightened by such powerful weapons these people had, but he got tired of these games, and he decided to take on the goal seriously. In an instant, the winged horror closed the distance to the rhinoceros's wreckage and landed on the hull, which, however, was merely a human-controlled mechanism that was easy to handle. Having opened the armored hull, the armor plates were torn off the rhinoceros's skin with a screeching sound. Grinning, the creature stuck its muzzle into the opening, where Patrick was waiting for him with a pistol at the ready. A second later, a projectile of black metal shot out of the pistol's barrel, piercing the monster's shoulder. Red hadn't expected such force, so he didn't have time to react. Things would be interesting with this man. The multi-ton body of the fiend fell on its back. Slightly clouded eyes made out a male body. Now Red began to understand why the organization had chosen him for this task. Patrick pointed the gun at the head. Patrick could hardly hear what the monster was muttering under his breath when his face half metamorphosed into a human one. The fat man couldn't believe his eyes. It was his old friend. The lab was in chaos, and a whistling wind came through a hole in the ceiling and blew around the room. But fortunately, Pink and the professor didn't notice any damage to Vanessa's tank. The electricity was intermittent, telling everyone that the main power source was not working, and that another one was supplying energy, which was life-threatening for the girl. But to the professor's horror, the container with stem cells for the girl was destroyed. The operation to implant them was impossible, and another way had to be found. Not all was lost. It was possible to use Vanessa's father as a donor, something Rozovaya immediately informed the scientist about. The idea itself was possible, but difficult to implement. The discussion of the upcoming operation that had begun was interrupted by the sarcastic voice of an unfamiliar person who entered. Hat, with a sly smile, informed those present that the girl's father could not help them. People in the laboratory saw this man for the first time. A blond man with medium hair, wearing a business suit, glasses and a hat, introduced himself and apologized for any inconvenience he might cause. The professor looked at the stranger in shock, wondering how he had managed to penetrate the complex and what this man had done to Brisley, and whether he was even human at all. Everything inside the old man went cold. The Hat raised his hands up unarmed, declaring that he was not their enemy, but he had to use the man's blood and flesh to move here, and this information did not make anyone in the lab feel any better. The scientist's voice changed to a scream. He accused all members of the organization of madmen and murderers. The Hat reassured the old man, saying that the girl's father had not died, but that he himself would soon turn into a zombie. The Hat calmed those present by declaring that he did not wish harm to anyone. He had been sent by the organization to take care of Vanessa and the professor, but the old man had no intention of helping them. He sensed a catch. The scientist did not want to work for them or help them in any other way. Everyone in this organization was trying to get him, and he was afraid to imagine for what purpose. Brandon told a lot about the organization itself and its people. The Hat saw this, but asked the professor if he told the whole truth, and whether it was worth believing this man at all. The sounds of breaking metal and steel continued unabated, and one by one the organization's mechs fell, though it seemed to Brandon that the stream of their attacks was endless, and that they themselves would never end. Several more mechs surrounded him from the flanks and began to pour a barrage of fire and shells. But for now, the youth's mech's force field was coping with the load, but how much longer would he last? He didn't allow himself to be fired upon for long. His palette of guns and ammunition had enough variety for everyone, and another wave of Brandon's shots hit several more attackers. Brandon stood surrounded by the wreckage of the drones, noting that despite their impressive firepower, they were nothing more than mindless constructs that the swordsman had dealt with. Suddenly, the radar showed a huge object right next to Brandon. A white, dragon-like creature appeared in front of him from nowhere. The monster had a white coloring with a lavender mane and a narrow mouth with rows of teeth. The creature's appearance was enhanced by a pair of wings. Brandon chuckled to himself. The varied uniforms of the organization's members always surprised him, but his enemies were endowed with a special aesthetic, which didn't make things any easier. The monster rushed to attack, sending a series of blue energy blasts at the mech, but it was difficult to catch Brandon off guard. Despite its massive appearance, the mech easily dodged. The arrow-like volleys landed a few centimeters from where Brandon was. These weren't just projectiles. They followed his mech until they hit an obstacle. The monster concentrated energy in the eye area, blinding the mech with a green glow, like a flashlight. But although it did not cause harm to the person, the radiation itself slowed down all the structures of their black metal. The young man tried unsuccessfully to move the shackled robot. But before he could think of anything, the monster doused him with an endless stream of pink flame from its mouth, and its fur was on fire. Patrick never moved his gun, holding his, as he thought, dead friend at gunpoint. He couldn't believe his eyes that old Iroquois was alive, just as the user himself was no less surprised by this meeting. The angry fat man demanded answers as to why his friend had joined an organization that was seeking to start a new apocalypse on Earth, what had happened to him, and how he could have done such a thing. Patrick's resentment knew no bounds. With tears in his eyes, he demanded an explanation as to why he had killed their mutual friends. All of them, including himself, considered him their brother and trusted him completely. Iroquois did not make this decision easily. He admitted that while carrying out his tasks with people, Iroquois decided to end this business, declaring his last participation in this business, which did not suit the state. Patrick's friend tells how the Dark Organization helped him escape. Later, he returned for his friends, but Patrick himself was not there. Patrick asks if he brought their two comrades into the Dark Organization and if they are alive. A friend suggests that Patrick return to them, and then their gang can reunite again. Patrick is angry that there is no place for him in an organization that exterminates humanity and turns people into monsters, and his friend has become a monster himself and will even drag his comrades into it. A friend suggests remembering the days when they robbed the rich, gave everything to the poor, and were glorious. But they could not continue to live like that for the rest of their lives. The organization helps create superhumans, but before, they didn't even have documents, just a bunch of enemies on their tail. But Patrick can't be persuaded. He swings the ball and cuts off his friend's tail. The fat man asks his friend again if their comrades Kun and Xiao are alive. His friend realizes that Patrick hasn't changed and is still just as stubborn, so he flies up. Preparing to attack, he says that since he doesn't want to go with him, he will see those two. Grandpa Henry says Brandon has his reasons, but he's trying to protect Vanessa and there's no need to sow discord between them. The man has little idea what they have been through, but how can he explain the scene he witnesses? Pointing at Vanessa, he says that this is a standard experiment to create an anomaly. The man says that Brandon apparently decided to make an anomaly that would obey him, so he cultivated a feeling of affection in her. No one understands what he means when he says that Brandon hid his identity as a mechanic well. He says that mechanics will not disdain any methods to study black gold and its influence on people. The man walks up to the computer and starts doing something there, which worries Grandpa Henry. He says it's nothing special. He'll just help finish what he started. And although he's not a mechanic, he listens well to what's going on around him. All that is needed is to make some adjustments, and then she will become an anomaly, loyal to the organization of darkness. The more anomalies they have, the stronger they are, the man says. And something starts to happen to Vanessa. Grandpa Henry is angry. He swings his arm at the inhuman bastards and tells them to go away. But suddenly everything starts to burn and Henry is forced to retreat with his rage. Here Bo appears and is asked to be careful about playing with fire in the lab. But he is simply in anticipation. He can't wait to meet his partner. He leans over Vanessa and, stroking the flask, says that he has a small connection with her. The man asks if all the mechanisms around the institute have been eliminated and receives a positive answer. Bo says he'd like to have some fun and burn someone, but there's no one here. He points to the girl and asks the boss if he can burn her. They allow him, but in a different place. The man reaches out to her with his burning hand, asking her to scream louder than he will. But he stops, because another anomaly breaks into the lab. It was Emmy. She looks down, her gaze illuminating the entire room and everyone inside with green light. With a wave of her tail, she pushes Bo away, and in doing so, takes off the head of his boss. Grandpa Henry is happy to see her, says it's a good job, and asks to kick them out of the lab. Dr. Amelia rushed to the computer to restore the original data. But the process with black gold itself is irreversible. The light from Emmy's eyes envelops Vanessa, and the doctor sees that the black gold's activity is decreasing. She asks Emmy to continue irradiating the baby, as this slows down the mutation. Brother Brandon said that in an emergency, you need to start a data backup program. Suddenly, someone attacks Emmy from behind, and she can't continue irradiating Vanessa. A guy from the dark organization comes into the lab again. He recognizes Emmy, who is being searched for. He says that his superiors ordered that she be eliminated if she could not be brought back alive. This guy attacks with a blue wave from his hand, but Emmy takes his attack by opening her mouth. They continue the battle, during which they drop the stand with the flasks and everything breaks. At this point, Brandon is also fighting and doesn't like that too much energy is being spent on the shield. He wants to defeat the anomaly faster and releases a lot of flame from his robot. The robot dodges another attack and fires metal bullets in response. With the monster distracted by them, Brandon wields a chainsaw and advances on the enemy. He wounds her and, making a circle, flies high to end up above the anomaly. The protagonist lands, crushing the monster's head, and burns the rest of the body so as not to leave any remains. Brandon notices the girl who has been watching the entire battle and points a laser at her. He knocks down the corner of the building, but the girl is nearby and says that with such strength, he deserves to be called a mechanic. The guy tries to kill her, but the girl moves away, saying how sorry she is that he didn't join the Mechanics Council. Brandon tisks, gritting his teeth, and says that it is the one who also managed to teleport. He moves towards her, but she holds out her hand, restricting all movements of his robot. The schoolboy begins to lose control of the mech. The energy return has greatly decreased. He asks since when she is and who she is, whether she is a traitor in the council. She says she was the great wisest Bae on the Mechanics Council, so he should know her. The girl makes a small downward movement with her hand and presses the entire Brandon robot to the ground. She explains that this technology for managing black gold will only emerge in 100 years, and the wise thing would be to join the organization. The guy laughs because no one expected or could have thought that this was the great and wise Bae. Brandon heard that she was dead or missing, but it turns out she was a lackey of a dark organization. He says that by continuing to do this, she will only bring shame on her grandfather, the sage Dr. Henry. But the girl says that she joined the organization only to implement her plan. Her grandfather created the theory about black gold, and she merely complimented his work. Brandon asks if her plan is to turn everyone into anomalies, and assumes she killed the mechanics' colleagues. She told the truth, but they didn't believe her, and in order to keep unnecessary people from interfering, they should be gotten rid of. He says that if Brandon takes a different approach, he will eventually become like them. A meteorite carrying a zombie virus fell to Earth and infected people through the process of photosynthesis in human bodies, which is how black gold was created. This is her theory, but what was made public is not the full version. The Mechanics Council decided to hush up this idea, and in the end, it became nothing more than a town rumor, and she was given a non-disclosure order. Did keeping the secret from her motivate her to fake her death and get rid of those she didn't like? 5 months ago, what brought the zombie virus to Earth was a small meteorite no more than 30 meters in diameter. In 100 years, the same one will fall, but 10 times larger than the previous one. The first was only a reconnaissance mission, while the second will concentrate their forces. Brandon, listening to the girl, apparently began to understand her and that she was telling the truth. Even if it is an ordinary meteorite, it cannot be destroyed by weapons, and it is also a high-speed asteroid with high-energy radiation. The space industry was in decline, and the Council of Mechanics continued to ignore it. But when the situation became even more dire, they used their remaining resources to build a secret spaceship for the council members. Fortunately, the blown-up time machine was dug up and repaired, although it was only possible to send the consciousness of 1 or 2 people into the past. Since the destruction of the Earth is inevitable, then what is the point of returning to this moment in time? When the meteorite falls, everyone will turn into zombies, and those who are immune will gain superpowers. She simply sped up the process to get pure black gold. To combat a greater catastrophe that will happen in 100 years, she intends to unite the forces of all people and anomalies. At this time, in the laboratory where Vanessa lies, a battle takes place between Emmy and the envoy of the Dark Organization. Grandpa Henry is buried under the rocks, and opens his eyes to see an unconscious Dr. Amelia in front of him. The boss who had his head cut off is alive, and he says it's unwise to take on a defective item. He approaches Henry's prone grandfather and clears the debris from him, but receives only insults in response. He says they were required to protect him, one of the few requests his granddaughter made. He says that in 30 years, she will become the greatest and wisest of mechanics, and in 100, as a technical advisor to the Dark Organization, she will lead everyone and conquer half the Earth. Grandpa Henry is very disappointed. He asks again if his granddaughter is a member of the Dark Organization. She is one of the founders of the organization. As a progenitor, if she had healthy legs, maybe she would have been able to achieve greater success. Grandpa Henry begins to understand what happened one day and loses his power of speech. 10 years ago, as a result of his experiment, she lost her legs, and his son, with whom she already had a strained relationship, took her abroad. With the onset of the apocalypse, it is difficult for even ordinary people to survive, let alone the disabled. But she never blamed him, but on the contrary, always protected him. Grandpa Henry felt sad. He also misses her very much and feels guilty. After all, the reason he is so kind to Vanessa is because she reminds him of his granddaughter. The boss wakes up his partner Joe and says it's time to get Grandpa Henry and Dr. Amelia back to work. Bo, who was already lifting Dr. Amelia, is distracted by something and freezes. Vanessa's father is standing in the hallway, but there's a problem. He's turned into a regular zombie. The boss asks his partner Bo to deal with him, but he is scared because this is not an ordinary zombie. He immediately uses his superpower, but the problem is that fire doesn't affect him. Amelia opens her eyes and sees Vanessa's father, who has turned into a zombie, grabbing the boy's hand. But the boss kicks him in the chest and says that at crucial moments, something always goes wrong. The girl looks down, and there lies a stricken Annie, with her enemy standing on top of her. He extols himself, telling her to accept her fate, because he has no equal in speed. Patrick's friend looms over him, ready to kill him, and tells him that he is being merciful to him and that it is better to become abnormal. A bright green light flew vertically into the center of the building, casting its green rays. The guy smirked and couldn't believe the gray-haired girl's words, considering it a crazy theory. The girl begins to explain to the guy that as long as black gold exists, all living things will be wiped off the face of the earth. The girl then says that the only way to avoid this disaster is to become an anomaly. The protagonist asks what exactly she wants from him. The guy refuses the girl's offer to become an anomaly. The hero claims that he is not interested in messing around with and controlling mutants. The young man develops a defense system, presented in the form of blue shells. Suddenly the hero starts firing from his durable armor suit. The gray-haired girl begins to float in the sky, her pink aura wrapping around her. The girl holds her hand in front of her, intending to harm the main character. The guy's robot receives a powerful and sudden blow from the gray-haired girl. The girl creates a ball around herself, thereby protecting herself from her opponent's fiery attacks. The robot holds its hand forward from which electrical discharges emanate. The guy boasts about the impenetrable power of his armored suit. Maintaining a calm expression, the girl surrounds herself with bright lighting effects. The robot releases electrical force through its metal palm. A conversation arose between the two opposing sides. A confrontation between a robot controlled by the main character and a girl who was in a ball. The hero, lost in thought, says that he is the only one people could rely on. The girl, inquisitively, asks the hero if he will be able to find the best way to save humanity. The guy gives a convincing answer that he won't know until he tries. The gray-haired girl makes fun of the guy for being willing to trust people, knowing their weakness and selfishness. Suddenly, a green figure of a girl in the form of an anomalous creature appears in the sky, radiating its light. The guy is surprised by the sudden appearance of the girl in a new look. The girl, sincerely not understanding, asks the guy why he is resisting the abnormal ones if he himself created the same one. The girl, floating in the sky, begins to absorb the power of the gray-haired girl. Amazed by Vanessa's power, the girl cannot believe that this girl was able to absorb her powers, and Brandon stands in amazement, stupefied by what is happening. The guy, his mouth open in surprise, wonders how the girl was able to absorb the energy of black gold. Vanessa happily declares that she will finally be able to help everyone by cleansing the zombies of energy. Floating in the sky, the girl says that she doesn't know how much longer she can hold out. Then the girl, looking at the guy, says that the main character met her in the past. The gray-haired girl listens with confusion on her face as the girl talks about her. After hearing this, the girl asks Vanessa if she can read minds. The girl is glad that she was always surrounded by support, and that she felt good nature in every person. An old man bends over a dead man lying on the ground, reacting with distress, while a pink-haired girl in the background mourns the girl whose head she holds in her hands. A girl with a sad face looks at her sister, holding her in her arms, and nearby lies the protagonist's fair-haired friend. The fat guy watches in horror as the old man lies across from him. The girl says goodbye to everyone, asking Brandon to take care of himself and the future of humanity. An abstract background with a predominance of green, in the center of which is a white star with long rays diverging in different directions.